Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Jank Tank, episode number 42. My name is Timothy Zaccanino. I'm going to be your Pack One, Pick One today. Joining me on the wheel, we've got Teld. Teld's back with us, as usual. And Chris. We got Chris back on. And I got to say, Chris, I'm glad you're here. We had some good guests with Danelius and Mop in our previous couple episodes, but this is a really exciting episode to do. We're going to do our Tarkir Dragonstorm cube review at a high level today. We already did the Peasant Cube review, which I think is actually going up live today as of this recording. But yeah, Chris, I'm glad you can join us for this one, because this is just a very, very exciting set coming out, and a lot of cards that I think are just going to appeal to you for sure, and then just like people in general from this set. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks. It has been a little while, hasn't it? I've been having some issues.
This lets us just confirm that we didn't, in fact, ship Chris off to a farm upstate.
We didn't. We thought about it. But
I thought about it. Shit. Yeah.
Well, hardship hits, and you got to deal with stuff. But I'm glad you're here for this episode in particular. I think you'll have a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of Chris cards in this set, if that makes sense. There's a lot of Chris cards.
Yeah, there really are. And after Ether Drift was just kind of as, whatever it was, I think this looks like a nice comeback.
Yeah, for sure. I want to jump right into it, but let's get our housekeeping out of the way real quick. So just from the beginning, remember the best way to support Jank Diver Gaming and the Jank Tank podcast is to join the Discord server. Come draft with us, give us your feedback. It's a great place to hang out with like-minded individuals and talk about Cube, Retail Limited, especially when a new set drops next week, or I guess this week as of the time you're listening to this recording, and people are actually, drafting and hanging out in the lobbies and sharing their drafts with each other. It's always super hype that first couple weeks of a new set. You can find links to the Discord server wherever you're listening to this podcast. We host scheduled drafts throughout the week. We've got Peasant Cube on Saturday nights. We've got the mainline Jank Diver Cube, which is going to be kind of the focus of this review episode. We've got that on Sunday nights. We have F&M style drafts on Fridays, which they fire sometimes, they don't fire sometimes, but on Fridays, players get to vote which cube they want to play, and there's always plenty to do in the server. So come check out the Discord. Find our socials on Twitter at JankDiverGaming, YouTube.com/JankDiverGaming, and you can occasionally find Teld streaming on Twitch.tv/Teld Talks, TELD Talks. We're going to skip our single card discussion for this review and just get right into talking about Tarkir Dragonstorm. Again, we're going to talk about cards at a high level today, so a lot of the rares and mythics will make their way in here. Plus, we'll have some repeats of some of the Peasant Cube cards, because that's just how they design commons and uncommons these days. They're pretty good. So I want to say just my perspective from the very onset of this is Tarkir Dragonstorm, for whatever reason, I mean, we could list a lot of reasons, but this is the most exciting Magic the Gathering set I have seen since like the 2010s, perhaps, maybe not that far back. And it's because it looks like a Magic set, and it's got just amazing design across the flavor of the set and the cards. Like, I know Teld especially, we talked about him a little bit, but every single day of spoiler season for this set, all the way up until the common and uncommon dump, just felt like they were jamming awesome cards, like 5, 6, 7 awesome cards every single day. It's like they really cooked with the card design, and then the flavor is there to back it up. So like Bloomborough came out last year, and I think all three of us were like, yeah, the flavor of this set's pretty cool, but the cards themselves were like, whatever. And then there was like Duskmorn as the reverse of that, where it's like, okay, these cards are really strong and really awesome, but the flavor of the set is like half miss, half hit. But this just nails both of them. The cards are awesome, the flavor is awesome, and the only way this set like fails in any regards of it is if the limited format ends up being like super unbalanced or something. But right now, this is just a hit in my heart, and I am super, super excited to talk about this set.
Except for blue.
Yeah, blue gets nothing.
Yeah. Blue didn't get a whole lot.
I was just going to say, this set, even at the rare, mostly managed to, it seems like, hit these really slick, sweet designs that are easily understood and cool and worth talking about, but not necessarily best in slot. There's a couple of them that I think are, like, obviously better than the competition, but I think that
like
even at rare and
mythic
managed... yeah, definitely that one.
Oh, are we talking about that? Okay.
No, we don't have to.
They mostly managed to avoid just having like this is Screaming Nemesis is obviously the best card in the entire set type deal, They did a great job on this. It feels like a Magic set, which is something we're going to get a lot less of, so I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. Really just very excited that they nailed the return to Tarkir and managed to bring together the flavor. I mentioned this in the Peasant review whenever you eventually get to watch that one, but they really nailed what I thought was going to be very difficult, which was incorporating the Khans 3-color kind of wedge area, but also incorporating the dragons that they did with Dragons of Tarkir, and they kind of just did it flawlessly. This is as far as flavor goes, for me, this is a 10 out of 10. This is a great set.
Mm-hmm. Thematically and logistically, so the Khans are back. We're back to like Khans of Tarkir instead of being back to Dragons of Tarkir, which I think everybody appreciated. From the lore perspective, I don't want to get into it, but like the Dragon Lords were just like F-offed, like they're just gone. And there's like Dragonstorms taking over the plane. There's actually like this whole subplot about how Sarkhan becomes a dragon and like leads a dragon army against Tarkir, but like for whatever reason, they didn't give the Sarkhan dragon card like they didn't give it an actual card. Like there's just no Sarkhan dragon, so that's super annoying. And then like Nicol Bolas is back at the end of the story or something like that, and it's just like, oh, we're doing that again. But awesome stuff going on there. Yeah, logistically, we're not going to talk about special guests because they're all reprints. There's no like bonus sheet or anything like that, so we're just going to talk straight Dragons of Tarkir for the entire time. I will say just up front, it is a threat heavy set, so a lot of creatures, a lot of really pushed creatures, not so much in the like interaction and spells department, but there's some of that going on too. Set mechanics, I think we can roll through these pretty quickly, but I was surprised to see there's no return in mechanics at all. It's just all new mechanics, some of which are just things that we've seen before being keyworded for the first time. And there's a lot of cameo mechanics too. Like we'll see Decayed once, we see Delve once, stuff like that. But did anybody else want to like kick off mechanics, or you guys want me to just like kind of roll through them and give any insight if you guys have anything to say about them?
Yeah, go ahead and knock it out.
Okay. Yeah, so ABZAN mechanic is first. This is Endure. Endure comes with a number on it, and when a creature endures, you either put that many +1/+1 counters on the creature, or you make a spirit token with that power and toughness. So Endure 3 would be either put 3 +1 counters on me or make a 3/3 spirit. Not a flying spirit, just a regular ground creature. That's the ABZAN mechanic. It's basically Fabricate, which we've seen before, except the token varies. The token can be a little bit bigger, and there's only one of them at a time, and it only appears on creatures, though sometimes not as an ETB. Sometimes it can be on a spell or something like that. So the ABZAN mechanic, I mean, it's a token making mechanic that can also make creatures bigger, so there's a lot of flexibility to it. It's pretty good. I wish they would explore Fabricate more, and this feels like them explore and Fabricate. Flurry is the Jeskai mechanic. This cares about you casting 2 spells in a single turn. It's not new, it's just keyworded for the first time. We've seen this as the archetype for things like blue-red in Outlaws of Thunder Junction or black-white in Kaldheim. It gave us cards like Clarion Spirit, which is essentially a Flurry card. We'll talk about a couple of these here. This is probably like the wonkiest, I guess, of the mechanics because it requires you to actually like sequence things or do things in a certain way, whereas all the other mechanics just kind of work. So that has a lot of people saying like Jeskai is the worst clan or whatever. I don't have an opinion about that personally. Renew is the Sultai mechanic. It's a lot like Scavenge from Return to Ravnica. It lets you pay a cost and exile a creature with Renew from your graveyard to put some number of counters on a creature. It's usually +1/+1 counters, but there are a lot of cards that'll put things like stun counters on an opponent's creature, or flying counters, or even a decayed counter on certain creatures. So this is basically a flashback type mechanic that only exists on creatures and can sometimes have positives, sometimes have negatives. Mobilize, which is one of the most heavily supported mechanics in this set. It's the Mardu mechanic. It's all about attacking. Mobilize comes with a number, like Mobilize 2. And it means when that creature attacks, you create a number of 1/1 red warriors that are also tapped and attacking equal to that number, and they sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So just a very clean mechanic. It makes some extra attackers. They go away at the end of the turn. You'll see a lot of sacrifice effects and stuff like that hanging out with Mobilize. Like I said, it's just very, very heavily supported. A lot of the reasons cards are in this set is because Mobilize just makes extra bodies. Harmonize is flashback. It's literally just flashback, but it lets you tap a creature you control to reduce the Harmonize cost from your graveyard by the power of that creature. So if you tap a 3/3 in addition to paying the other costs, you can reduce the cost of the Harmonize cost by 3. Notably, you can use a summon and sick creature. Notably, you don't have to tap a creature at all. You could just pay the full harmonized cost, but this is just flashback with some extra upside. And because of the cost reduction, a lot of the harmonized costs are jacked really far up, but you got to imagine that they're coming down a little bit. So those are all the clan mechanics. Did you guys have any thoughts on any of these before I just go over the last two kind of like broader mechanics? Anything excite you here? Anything that seems really like it really pops out?
As far as exciting, I think Mobilize is the most scary mechanic. We talked about the 04 Ox that mobilizes a million dudes into play in the Peasant review, or we will talk about it. And here, I don't think there's a lot of cards that have Mobilize that are particularly good, but any card that just dumps a bunch of bodies into play is inherently a very scary card because of cards like War Leader's Call and cards like Blood Artist and things like that that really pay off from that. And then as far as the other side of things, it sort of feels like Flurry is almost all draft chaff and wonky at that. And then Harmonize, they basically, like you said, raise the cost by 2 to 3 over what you would expect to pay on the flashback. And so if you're not if you're just tapping a regular creature like a 2/2 or a 3/3, you're going to still be paying quite a premium on it. So it's not really a competitively costed mechanic.
Mm-hmm. I really like Endure specifically because, I think it's pretty well known that tokens and +1/+1 counters intersect with each other in a lot of ways. With the green and white cards that they've been printing over the years, I think it started with one of the Modern Horizons sets where they went really hard into counters and there was a counter distribution, but it goes well with tokens, yada yada. The cards that have Endure that are good are, in my opinion, really good. Yeah, there's just like a lot of clean mechanics in here, which I like. That also lends itself well to good selections for cubes.
Yeah, nothing like need for speed or start your engines or venture into a dungeon. Nothing you have to track. Just mechanics that are mostly things you've seen before that work kind of a little differently this time.
Very traditional Magic the Gathering kind of mechanics as opposed to whatever wonky nonsense we've had lately.
It's probably why I like it so much.
For sure. To close this out, there's also Omens. We're going to talk about 1 or 2 of those today. These are templated like adventures, but you don't get both half of the cards. You can either cast a creature, which is always a dragon in this set, and just ignore the Omen altogether, or you can cast the Omen half of the card, which is an instant or sorcery, usually with a pretty small effect, and it'll shuffle itself back into the library. It doesn't exile itself like an adventure. We talked in the Peasant Cube about how you can get in these like endless loops if both players like deck out with Omens. I don't think that's going to be a thing at higher level cubes because there's just not that many playable Omens, but these are basically just split cards. They're just split cards that have a creature on one half and an instant sorcery on the other half, and you don't get both like adventures. And then finally, Behold is the smallest mechanic in the set. It's only on 6 cards. It's like on a cycle of removal spells for limited, and then 1 rare that we're not going to talk about. And Behold just lets you like reveal a dragon when you do something to get an extra effect. The only reason I really like Behold is because it's the type of thing they can use on other type of cards later on in Magic. Like you might see like Behold Artifact or something like that in a set later on. But for the purposes of this set, it's not a big enough thing to really discuss beyond like, hey, it exists. So that's the kind of platter of mechanics we're getting here. 7 new mechanics, nothing returning, no more from Khans of Tarkir, no Delve coming back except on 1 card, and for the most part just clean designs, which are going to lead to clean cards that we're going to talk about. So unless you guys have any additional thoughts about the world building or the mechanics, like we can actually just start jumping into some of these cards we're excited about.
Yeah, that works for me. Let's do it.
All right, big deep breath. Get into it. I think the first card is just a phenomenal example of everything we've said so far. So I'll kick us off with white and kind of lead us into the things here. So the first card we're talking about here is Voice of Victory, 1 in a white for a 1/3 rare human bard. It has Mobilize 2. So when it attacks, you make 2 1/1s that are tapped and attacking. You sack them at the beginning of the next end step. And it also has a extra line of text that says your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, which feels like it was thrown in for like CEDH purposes or something like that, maybe for constructed purposes. But I mean, it basically shuts down counter spells. But we're talking a 1/3 that makes 2 extra 1/1s every time it attacks and shuts down interaction on your opponent's turn. Again, just very clean. I don't have to explain what that means to anybody, so we can just kind of talk about it from a pure power level perspective, and it seems good to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an example of what I just mentioned, which is like the mechanics feel very like clean and open, and as a result, good for cube. I mean, a 2-drop that, blocks while the turn it comes down, attacks, makes multiple bodies, 3 bodies coming out. I mean, granted, they get sacrificed at the end of the turn, but like, you're swinging for the fences anyway. You can abuse it with a instant speed sacrifice effect to get, like, I mean, if we still had Yawgmoth in the cube, this would just, I mean, Yawgmoth is broken with everything, right? But yeah, just being able to spit out multiple bodies. I mean, this obviously works well with Blood Artist. This works really well with any Anthem creatures you might have on board to make the whole package bigger. Curving this into Sanguine Evangelist is going to be really powerful. Not really a whole lot to say other than, like, this is sort of exactly the kind of white 2-drop that I'm looking for.
I do think there is a little bit to say in that this card is going to get outclassed on the board pretty quickly, so I don't know how often you're going to, against a mid-rangey or aggressive opponents, get to actually be attacking with this card. Obviously, it's very good against control if they're trying to not play, if they're on all 2/1 flyers or they're not playing, to the board pretty effectively. It's going to attack reasonably well, but I do think this card could get outclassed without extra help in terms of stat lines. That being said, I mean, and then on the other hand, like the can't cast spells during your turn is going to impact certain decks, mostly control decks, more than your aggro and mid-range deck. So while I do think this card is good, it's got a lot of synergies, it scales really well if you're able to use it, I do think it's one of those cards that, this is what I was talking about earlier. It doesn't immediately strike me that this is better than Luminarch Aspirant or some of the other elite 2s. I think it sits right in there as like one of the premier 2s competing with them. But 1/3 is not a great stat line. It is a understated creature in today's Magic the Gathering. So you've got to be able to get some extra value out of it, whether that's being able to pump it up to be able to attack. Obviously, we've got a lot of equipment at this point. You've got stuff like Birthday Escape get a lot more interesting with this card, right? Where you can give, or Ranger's Firebrand, where you can give it the ring and let it become unblockable. So now you can start getting your triggers reliably. But I do think you're going to have to work a little bit for this card to attack past like turn 3 or 4. And sometimes it won't even do that. Your opponent will just play like a 3/2 and it bricks it.
Yeah, I think for me, this is a card that, like, it's, in my opinion, obviously not as, like, powerful in a self-contained way as an all-star, like, Aspirant is. But given that you get 3 bodies on attacks out of a 2-drop, I think that this is a card that will really, really, really shine with some synergies, right? Like,
yes, and just to clarify, I do really like this card. I have it mentioned as a wild card in the show notes, but I just wanted to mention that there are some downsides to it that are not always present on these cards.
Right, it's not just a kick-ass aggro creature that also makes a ton of bodies. You got to facilitate it a little bit.
Correct. For our purposes, your opponents can't cast spell during your turn. Do you like that line of text, or would you rather that not be there?
At this stage, I think I'm fine with it because, like, in theory, it shafts counter spells, and it does. But the other thing is, even in other matchups, it's not uncommon for your opponent to make a proactive play and just, like, hold up removal. So even against, like, your red-black whoops all removal deck, it will make them make more decisions at sorcery speed, which is always going to be good for sequencing your own cards and feeling out how to commit to the board and play the matchup. So we'll see. This line of text would have bothered me more a while back, but I honestly think that maybe this is the kind of effect that White is looking for to just be more resilient against the decks that currently pick it apart completely.
Whether it's good or not, people hate playing against blue decks, and this gives you counterplay to that. I know that's entirely vibes and feels based, but when people get their spells countered, they rage. So now you can put this card in your deck, and along with another card later, to give yourself some resiliency to that. So
it's what the people want. I know I said I was going to lead us through White, but I think it's appropriate that Teld take the next card.
Yes. So next up we have Sun Pearl Kieran, which is 1 and a white for a 2/1 with flash, flying, and when it enters, return up to 1 target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it was a token, you draw a card. So we'll be mentioning this in the Peasant review and talking about how it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But this effect, we tried Nurturing Pixie in the mainline cube before, and it was a little underpowered. This kind of effect really needs to be pushed because there's not as many abusable game objects, ETBs, in our mainline cube, this sort of core Skyfisher effect. That being said, this one feels like it's tuned correctly, where it gives you the ability to block those 2/1 flyers that are played in blue. It lets you dodge removal. You can pick up random tokens like treasures or foods if you have them to draw a card. You can do a lot with it. It's got a lot of gameplay to it. You can re-pick up an Invasion of Ixalan or something like that. We do run some of those. So I'm hoping the flexibility that the flash and flying add will make this card playable. This is one that I'm not nearly as certain. While it's a complete A+ slam dunk in the Peasant Cube, this is one that I'm a little more hesitant here in the mainline cube, but I think this is pushed enough that we're supposed to try this.
Yeah, we don't have as much of the like whole push towards object creation or whatever that we do in the Peasant Cube. So Nurturing Pixie was pushed as far as this effect goes and was just kind of like a dumpy card, but I think it's because the body wasn't like not good enough on its own, whereas 2/1 flash flyer for 2 is like as a baseline is fine. I did ask last year for a flash 2/1 flyer that like gave a creature indestructible on ETB, kind of like a Plume Creed Escort in white, and this isn't quite that, but it's kind of like trying to achieve the same thing. So I think the stat line here gets this over the hump, and then everything else is just upside, and I like the way that this plays into Flurry and Mobilize at the same time. Like, again, the card design here is just impeccable with the mechanics, right?
Yeah, I think the flash is really here what pushes over the edge. The problem with Pixie was that you had to do it proactively. So even though it was super efficient, you could do it for a mana. We see it's a constructed all-star right now in standard. But because we don't have that kind of totality of cheap game objects, right, that allow you to use the Pixie proactively, I think the flash being able to like, pick this up in response to a Doomblade is just so much more gameplay, even though it costs a little more.
Yeah, the flash is 100. Like, I mean, if there was not flash on this card, we wouldn't even be discussing it, right?
No, because then it would just be Skyfisher, and we don't.
Yeah, then it would just be Skyfisher. Yeah, and I mean, I said before we started recording, I didn't want to get into every individual like nitty gritty line, but there's stuff you can do where you flash this in like on attacks where your opponent was just going to eat something anyway. But maybe they like block in a way where they weren't going to trade, you know, so they can pick up a freebie and then they don't. I think that this card is absolutely worth trying as well. It'll also it'll go nicely into Azorius and Bant like flash shells, but I think that this will be fine in just your white creature decks too. I think this card's got a lot of interesting play to it, and to me, it's just a really, really good example of what we have been talking about for a little while now, which is there are a lot of kind of clean, flexible designs that offer a lot of sort of gameplay lines, but are also like very easy to grok, and I just like the package.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this card in general. Pushing the Skyfishers into mainline territory is nice.
Bring back Blade Splicer. Blade Splicer did nothing wrong.
Yeah, we got to bring back Flash. We got to bring back the Blink package now.
Yeah,
I don't know where this next card sits on power level as far as like where it would stand next to the other white 3-drops we play, but the card is Sage of the Skies. It's 2 and a white for a 2/3 human monk with flying and lifelink, which a 3-mana 2/3 flying lifelink, not good enough of a card. But when you cast this spell, if you've cast another spell this turn, copy it. So the difference between paying 3 mana for a 2/3 lifelink and just paying 3 mana for 2/3 lifelinks is huge. Like the gap is insane between like this card being online versus not online, to the point where I'm like, do we play this? Like low curve white decks, you know, you can't do it on turn 3 without Mishra's Bauble or some sort of like weird setup with a rebound card or something like that, but anytime beyond turn 3, like on turn 4, being able to go like 1-drop into Sage of the Skies seems like a huge tempo swing to me. But the fail case of this just being like aerial responder that you just have to toss out on 3 just doesn't feel good. So like I don't know. This is like some pretty wide variance on like what you might get from this card if you put it in a deck.
This is the exact kind of card that I absolutely hate. It's high variance when you play it, but it's also high matchup variance because against like low curve aggressive decks where the 2/3 body blocks reasonably well and lifelink gains you life, this card is ridiculous. But against mid-range mid-range grindy decks where they're just like attacking you with Questing Beast, I'm not sure how good this card actually is. Like, I don't know, like it's obviously fine to get 2/3 flyers that also gain you life. That'll help you win a race. But it just strikes me that this card is just very, very good in aggro and against aggro, and it's a design I don't really like. Also, I mean, if it makes people draft Mishra's Bauble higher, maybe that would be a good thing, but I don't know. Just not the kind of card I'm gonna like. It's got an unpleasant sounding ceiling and a really, really low floor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Teld just said. Basically, I could put my own spin on it, but the lifelink especially makes it seem kind of like polar to me. And if you do this into your opponent's control deck, like that's still strong because you're making 2/2/3 flyers, but it's not really that big a deal. Like I see this going into like green-white mid-range decks primarily, and just being like another tool in the toolbox to make the aggro deck's life completely miserable. And then in like a really, really, really committed low-curve aggro deck, I see top decking this a lot on a relatively empty hand, and then feeling like you have to hold it until you draw another spell, which is fine, but yeah, this one doesn't appeal to me so much.
So this isn't the only time I'm going to mention this, but the line of plot my Railway Brawler, cast Railway Brawler, cast this is
that's huge. Yeah. There's actually I know Jeskai's whole thing is flurry, but there's a lot of space in this set dedicated to rewarding whatever your second spell is instead of like helping you actually enable flurry. So I think the idea was like, oh, you have mechanics like plot in standard already, so like you're supposed to combine those with flurry spells or something. I don't know, but yeah, anything that you can cast for free to set up a card like this seems kind of insane. But the variability between like what you get for 3 mana here is just insanely wide. Like it's just insane. So I think I agree. Like it's either going to be like the best card in your deck or the worst card in your deck. So,
I mean, what they should have done here, obviously, is just give us Ponder and Preordain at common.
Oh, yeah. Just throw it in. Oh, my God. Can you imagine if the set also just had Ponder reprint or whatever? Like, people would lose their shit.
I would be pleased. Yeah.
You mentioned really liking Endure as a mechanic. Did you want to touch on Anafenza, Chris?
Yeah, so put another entry in the list of good white 3-drops, I guess. Like, it's just getting frustrating at this point. Have you guys know, like, all of white's best cards are either 5-drops or 3-drops, but you just have, like, a limited number of those you can play. Okay, so this is Anafenza Unyielding Lineage. It is 2 and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature Spirit Soldier with some... I'm not sure how I feel about the art. But it has Flash and First Strike, which we used to play a long time ago. We played a Kaldheim card called Sigrid, God's Favored. Yeah, which was kind of like a Flash Banisher Priest that had 2/2 and First Strike. And when the size of your creatures outside of green tend towards the more efficient side of things, Flash 2/2 First Striker will be able to eat things in combat. But the important line is whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Anafenza endures 2, which is a reminder. Means you can put either 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature, or you can just make a 2/2. This can just do a bunch of really cool stuff in combat, right? Especially on defense, if your opponent attacks into you, you can flash this in, have it eat something that it can eat, and then have something else like trade off, like your opponent was planning to trade off, but then leave behind either a 4/4 First Striker or a 2/2 First Striker and a 2/2 token, with this sitting on board, just continually threatening to do it. You can flash this in response to a removal spell in order to get a token or size out of that creature dying. You can obviously, you can play this on attacks. I just think this is a really cool card, and the more white stuff that we get that has flash, the better it all gets. For a while there, we don't run some of these cards anymore, but for a while there, we had Wandering Emperor, Settle the Wreckage, and
Resto
Angel, so it was always like, oh man, which one is it? Well, if we play the Kieran, you've got the instant speed removal, you've got Archangel ABZAN, you've got this, Reprieve. The more stuff that you can do at instant speed in white, the less obvious it's going to be to your opponent what the instant speed thing is. And I personally have been enjoying white kind of becoming the truly secondary flash color in Magic. I think this is a cool card.
I think the thing that, obviously this card is, if you're able to flash it in on a removal spell, is going to be pretty good. I think the card, or the things that excite me with this card, would be like using it with something like Bloodghast, which I don't think is a particularly good card, but it is a non-token creature that you can kind of keep getting back.
Yep.
We've got still have some of the recursive cheap black creatures. I think that's pretty interesting. But I think this is going to be a card where I think most of the Endure cards you're going to usually make bodies. But I think with this one specifically, the first trigger is probably going to go on to Anafenza more often than not, because the difference between a 2/2 and a 4/4 is huge.
Yep.
And at which point it can kind of turn the corner and be like a pivot. Yeah, I like this card a lot. It is also a card that is kind of a blowout against Witchstalker Frenzy, given that the play patterns on that card tends to be the turn my dude sideways, cast Witchstalker Frenzy. So now you flash in an Offenza and you get to eat your opponent's already committed attacker, which is kind of cool.
Sure, yeah. There's some Wrath protection here too. Like if you run this out in response to a Wrath, like an Offenza will die, but you get to endure for every other non-token creature that died. So you might just be left with a board of 2/2s.
Oh yeah. Sorry, for whatever reason, my brain shortcutted to whenever defaulted to triggers once per turn. That is not what this does.
No, yeah. You can get multiple triggers here. Maybe there's something, or I guess Zahur can only be activated once per turn, but Woe Strider type stuff maybe. Like maybe this has a spot in like Black-White Sacrifice beyond what Teld was just saying. And I just wanted to point out Sigrund had protection from gods, so like who really wins in that fight, you know? All right, moving into some white spells here. So this is a really interesting card. I didn't put this on this list. It looks like Chris had something to say about it. I'm going to read the card because we talked about this for the Peasant review as like this being an uncommon is kind of wild. So I'm curious your thoughts here. But the card is Duty Beyond Death. It's 1 and a white for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. And the effect is creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So for Peasant Cube, we noted like there's a lot more token generation. The additional cost is a real cost, but like this is a huge blowout type effect for Peasant Cube that you really don't see at Uncommon push this way at this cost very often. And I have heard some reports from people who watched like the early access limited content that they did last Tuesday that this card was like amazing in the limited format. So what are your thoughts about this at a higher power level?
I think that there's power here. My gut is that in a cube like the Jank Diver cube, which is mostly about cards that have as much raw power as they can without demanding too much in terms of either your deck construction or what's going on the board, people might not put this in their decks, right? It's like every time we put a white card into the cube that like is really kind of specific, like kind of really specifically wants you to be black-white, they tend not to make decks. So, I mean, it's not like a card advantage tool, right? So it's not like if your opponent points this at your best thing and then you sacrifice your best thing that you're going to consistently get like value out of it. You know, it's not like you're 2-for-1ing your opponent inherently or anything. This card wants as much use, like you to pump out as many like tokens or sacrificial things as you can, and it'll just keep your whole board happy against Wraths, which is actually really nice in white. I think this is one of the main reasons that this caught my eye, is that white has some resilience issues, and white is becoming progressively more and more of a token generating color. So I think that this is totally testable. It also strikes me as the type of thing that if we decide we don't have room for it, I'm not going to like push really hard to find a cut for it. But it is cool.
Yeah, this reads to me as a really pushed commander card, because commander decks are really good at creating these Rube Goldberg machines of ridiculous board states and then needing to protect them. And this also increases your kind of throughput on combat. I go back and forth. This is one of the hardest cards to evaluate because that first line of text of an additional cost to sack a creature is one of the most penalizing texts in Magic you can put on a card. The output is here. The protection's there for Wraths. Like, you probably just win the game if you have it in hand when your opponent casts the Wrath and you've got the mana, right? It's going to frequently create these board states that just crush your opponent if you're able to use it. But these all, I can't help but feeling like these are all Magic Christmas Land scenarios in a way of like, all right, I curved out and I had the mana open to do that. And, you know, we were in a spot where the line came up and we blew them out. But what happens when your opponent goes, you know, Doomblade your guy, play a blocker, and then you top deck this with like 2 or 3 creatures in play, you know, that like aren't tokens, which happens a lot, right? The Jank Diver cube tends to be a cube where the matches get a little grindy because players just trade off resources efficiently. And then also, this strikes me as really, really bad against green because you're not outsizing the green decks. Like maybe if you go wide enough because they don't play enough removal, maybe, but if this doesn't kill them, right? You're just down more cards against a deck that doesn't really care because they're already outsizing you even with the +1 counters. So I don't know. This is a card that I can go either way on because I think the power level is there, but it's so hard to grok because the cost is so steep.
Yeah, and I can only echo a lot of what you guys said. So this probably falls squarely in like we should test it to see like what it does territory, because it's hard to kind of like parse out like what the use case for it is.
Yeah, we definitely could. My suspicion, well, let me just say, I think if you design a cube where your player, like, it's very obvious from the cards and your players also know that, like, white is explicitly, like, everything makes tokens. like that's really been your focus, then I think that this is like easily testable, like easily testable. I think for our cube, it would probably improve in quality substantially if we sort of decided we wanted to warp our white section more explicitly around token generation, which actually off air, that's something I'd like to maybe talk to you guys about.
Raise the
is
alarms.
Like,
yeah, bring back raise the alarms. I'm good.
well, yeah, just white in general. Like, is it really supposed to be a 1-drop aggro deck anymore? Is that the best proactive white creature deck that we can build? Maybe not. But yeah, I could go either way on this. I think the effect is powerful, but to Teld's point, like if you're just going like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and then the next turn you like play 2-drop and hold this up, and your opponent just like goes to Doomblade your 3-drop or whatever, and you sacrifice your 1-drop, like that's fine, but you still sacrifice like a card and this to get the counters on your other stuff, which
at that point you're just playing instant speed battery solidarity.
yeah, exactly. At that point, like that's basically what you're doing. So I don't know. I could go either way on this. I just wanted to mention it. But this the next card is a lot more generically grokkable, I would say.
I did want to just mention one more note on Duty Beyond Death is way spectacular pile up. The Wrath from Ether Drift removes Indestructible, so this doesn't even protect you against that Wrath. But
also Languish.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Wraths get around it. Hour of Devastation or whatever gets it too, but
Season of Loss.
Yeah. All right. So
I'm actually, now that you guys have mentioned it, I'm off of it. That new dragon that's
Toxic
-X on everything. Yeah, Meat Hook Massacre.
All right, maybe this card sucks.
Maybe this card's not good. Okay, maybe the card just sucks. Let's just move on.
All right, we got there. So Static Snare, I suspect this card will not suck. It's 4 and a white for an uncommon enchantment with flash. It costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature, and when it enters, you exile an artifact or creature until an opponent controls until the enchantment leaves the battlefield. So kind of Witchstalker Frenzy repurposed as a slightly more expensive like Banish and Light. It is worth noting, like, it is 1 mana more expensive than Witchstalker Frenzy, and it only targets attacking, or it only counts attacking creatures, not creatures that have attacked this turn, which means you have to do it during combat. You can't wait until like the end step to fire it off for a discount or something like this. I think if Witchstalker Frenzy cost 1 additional mana and it was 5 mana, it would still be a banger of a card. So I have no like doubt that this is a really good proactive kind of Oblivion Ring, while still being like playable in a control deck against attackers. Not ideal there. Just seems like a good proactive white removal spell.
And then your opponent hits you with the, you're like, all right, plunge my board, play this, and then your opponent hits you with that Disenchant or Brazen Bar or whatever, and you cry yourself to sleep.
You get your blocker, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like to see... Yes. Short answer, yes. Witchstalker Frenzy has been good. I expect this will also be good. They've done a really good job. I got absolutely trounced in the finals in the last match that I played against the only way I can describe it is a Boros Prowess deck.
Triggers you up the Beanstalk too.
It does trigger up the Beanstalk, yeah. It's kind of cool that this is a aggro-oriented white card that could wheel if you're the white aggro deck, right? Because this is not ideal for a control deck, right? So like the control deck can pass this a decent amount of the time, and you might actually end up wheeling this if you're the only white aggro player.
We've played other aggro effect or removal effects before that are more oriented towards one style or another to kind of make it easier for aggressive decks to pick up pieces of removal that are great in their decks but are going to be easier to wheel than other pieces of white removal if someone else is in like white control or something.
It just occurred to me why they probably templated this differently than Witchstalker Frenzy, because correct me if I'm wrong, but Witchstalker Frenzy gets reduced for each creature that attacked this turn, right?
Yeah, I mean, mobilize is the joke
and mobilize, right? Yeah. Your attack triggered creatures. Yeah.
So much of the design of this set overall is because mobilize exists, the way that it does. Teld has like 18 lines of like text underneath this next card. So did you want to?
Well, that's because it makes tokens.
It does make tokens. Yeah, Teld, did you want to read the Planeswalker here?
So up next is Elspeth Stormslayer. It's 3 white for another Elspeth. It has the exact same art as Archangel Elspeth.
It does.
If 1 or more token would be created under your control, twice that many tokens are created instead. So we've got that, Anointed Procession passive. And so for a +1, we create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, which means you actually create 2. For a 0, we've got put a +1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until your next turn, mind you. It's not until end of turn, it's until your next turn. And then for a -3, destroy target creature an opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater, so it's got a Doomblade staple to it. Like, okay, I mentioned that most of the cards in this set didn't strike me as just like the most, pushed version of whatever they're doing, but like, what is this card? What is this? Am I freaking out here? Because this card strikes me as like easily the best card in the set. This is like
this card's wild. I would have loved to have art. The art's okay, but it could have been better for a card that's like this good.
Why does it give +1 counters? Why does the flying last until the next turn? Why does it have a Doomblade stapled to it? The world may never know.
Why does it double not only the counters that it makes? Like, it would. This card would be crazy if it said +1, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature token. Like, people would be like, oh my god, that's amazing. But no, it just doubles any tokens that you make. Like, if you just like curve like rabble. Like, I mean, obviously this is like rah, 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 but like just for funsies, like if you curve like a rabble man into like a hero of Bladehold into this.
This actually gets around a lot of the restrictions too, because cards like Jadar only trigger if you don't control a decay zombie, right? And like doubling a decay zombie is not a big deal, but my point is that there's cards that trigger if, like Ophomancer maybe is a better example of a card that only triggers if you don't have the snake, but this just doubles, so you only have the one trigger resulting in 2 snakes.
Oh Jesus! Not that this really impacts our cube that much, but for those of you that it might, just note that this doesn't say if one or more creature tokens would be created. It's any type of token. I expect this to show up all over the place in like different formats in Magic, like double treasures, double whatever.
To 6 loyalty with 2 blockers.
Yeah. This strikes me as it'll probably be the most expensive card in the set for Commander because of Commander, but like I actually think it's kind of a questionable constructed card because 5 mana is just infinite mana for a sorcery speed effect.
Unless you 0 and kill your opponent. I don't know. This has like the game ends vibes to it.
Yeah, but your Heartfire hero killed them on turn 3, so why are we're not casting a 5-drop? Game's over.
Yeah, I mean, this is the classic, I have no board, so I'm going to make an instant board, or I have a board, so I'm going to end the game. And also, it just has this stupid Doomblade attached to it, too. So it's like, kill your best creature.
Bring back Soul Herder. Bring back Soul Herder, baby.
Bring back Soul Herder.
Flicker those token makers. Flicker that Blade Splicer. Hey, do you remember when we were playing Mondrak?
I do remember. I thought it was better than people gave it credit for what it's
I also thought it was better than people were giving it credit for, but yeah, no, this card's crazy.
What if you curve this into what if you curve Mondrak into this, and then you double on double, and then you play your 6 mana Elspeth, and you just have the full mid range curve of make infinite tokens.
I'm sorry, we can go 4-drop Elspeth into 5-drop Elspeth into 6-drop Elspeth now.
Yeah.
Give us 3-drop Elspeth, you cowards.
Yeah, this is pretty wild. I fully expect that this is a card that we'll play for a while, and then we'll start hearing some complaining about. Because, like, all joking aside, like, a white deck, like a white mid-range deck could very well, especially if they were on the play and consistently hit their mana, even if you answer their early plays with, like, Doomblades or whatever, they could very well, like, literally go, like, Gideon into this, into, like, Elspeth 6, and then, like, how are you ever supposed to win?
In the aggro decks, the 4-mana Elspeth just doing the Maul of the Skyclave impression is pretty good. Now imagine you get most of that value for your entire board. Yeah, I actually think the 0 ability is the best ability on this card, though.
Jesus. Yeah, okay. Very powerful Planeswalker.
And one last note I wanted to make about it, because I haven't said it in a while, it enables the thing and it does the thing, which is a classic 1-2 punch for an excellent cube card. Have a bunch of tokens, kill your opponent with them. Don't have a bunch of tokens,
and
make
to
a bunch
top
of
it all
tokens.
off, this is only a 5-drop if you're not playing green cards in your deck, in which case you're casting it on like turn 4 and your opponent's crying.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can literally in a green-white deck, if you're more of like a green mid-range deck, playing some very high-end, like powerful white cards, like it's very easy to imagine a line where you're on the play and you play this on turn 3. So we might eventually have to cut this one. It's just kind of like a Death Queen.
Yeah. Chris, close out white with this enchantment for us.
Okay, so Smile at Death is 3 white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a +1 on each of those creatures. Notably, this doesn't say anything about exiling them if they die.
Whoops.
So this is cool. And I think that if you are playing, especially if you are playing like an enchantment themed cube with like a lot of small ball creatures with like enchantment creatures with like ETBs and things like that, I think this is a very cool card. One thing that we have noticed with like Virtue of Persistence, for example, is it's a very, very powerful card, but sometimes you are at a point where you can slam the enchantment half of that, and there just isn't really anything in the graveyard yet to abuse the crap out of it with. This card, I think, is going to have a lot of situations in R-Cube where you're just going to be able to infinitely recur some small stuff with ETBs, and it's going to be really, really powerful and like kind of unbeatable against like controlling decks, for example. But like if I'm in an aggressive race, I have no interest in this. I think this is a very powerful card, especially in constructed formats like Commander. I'm sure that there's some really, really broken like combo creatures that you can consistently spit out with this or whatever. But for R Cube specifically, I'm not seeing it. If you are doing like a slower roll synergy, big stuff cube, like this strikes me as like a cool chromatic card, cube card maybe. But I don't think it's for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a 5 mana card that we need to untap with and has no buyout mode. Pass.
I think that's like that does probably kill it, right? Because it just does nothing until your next upkeep, like literally does nothing. So if you're getting attacked, you probably die. But I do think
more specifically, it's a 5 mana card you have to set up. You don't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you don't even get guaranteed value off this one.
Yeah, I think the card is very cool. It has some very high upside. I'm not willing to just dismiss a card like this because it doesn't do something right away. It just means you have to draft with that in mind. But it does require a lot of setup and does not promise that like there will be creatures there to get back. But like obviously if it gets going, like your opponent just can't kill you because you just keep looping the same 2 power. It's power 2 or less? Holy shit. I thought it was mana value 2 or less. Never mind.
No.
That's huge. But
I know we don't really speak its name anymore, but like if you have like a really strong like tokens or like creature synergy thing going on, like you could theoretically put Angel of Invention or Tristani Discordant back on the battlefield like every single time. Or Yawgmoth, or
It doesn't change the setup of it. It just changes the creatures you're getting back are probably like way better. Of course, it's power 2. It's a reference to Alesha. So
yeah. I must have woke up on the wrong side of the bed because I feel like normally this is the kind of card that I would get excited over, and I'm just like I can't get past the 5 mana need to untap with it and set it up to do anything.
It's not an ideal cube card. Like it's like playing like Divine Visitation or something where it's like okay, I'm gonna use turn 5. I'm gonna take turn 5 off completely to hopefully have like explosive turns later on, and those are the type of cards that don't really make it in the cube set often.
That's fair. I would say that it's not like what we're looking for our particular cube, but I do think it's an interesting cube card insofar as if you are like working on a slower cube that you want your decks to be doing more setup but have really high ceilings for the things that they're setting up. I think that this is a very cool cube card if you have an intended purpose for it and it fits the game speed that you're aiming for in your cube. It's not for us, but this is a very, very cool card. So if you're doing slow ABZAN like creature combo stuff, I think you're looking at something nice maybe.
I'm going to take the usual Chris line and say that this is obviously a commander design invading our Magic the Gathering space.
Well, it's cool. It's not for us, but for the reasons that we outlined, like if you have a cube that is interested in this card, you probably know.
We've got some other cards. In fact, there's a blue card coming up here that's only on the list because it's cool, not because it's like, oh, we want to slam this into our cube. Mm-hmm. But to kick us off for blue, who added Taigam here?
Yeah, so Taigam Master Opportunist is 1 in a blue for 2/2. Legendary human monk. It has Flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it, then exile the spell you cast with 4 time counters on it. If it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter from a suspended thing, and then when you remove the last one, you cast it for free.
And if it's a creature, it gains haste.
Yep, if it's a creature, it gains haste. So this is a really interesting blue card. You know, if you like play it and then double spell a couple times, you're going to get a couple free spells out of it, obviously, like on a delay. I think I might have been a little bit more interested in this if it had prowess, but then it might have just been too good. I don't know, because it's like, it's going to be combat relevant with prowess, and then as the free spells that you're storing away for later start triggering, it's going to get bigger again. As it stands, I don't know what vintage cubes or combo cubes really look like because I don't really play them that much, but I would imagine that there's probably some cool combo stuff that you can do with this card where you're stashing away like multiple copies of things or Storm or whatever. Let's do the Time Warp again. But yeah, like I was like, oh, this is a cool card. But then the more I thought about it, I think, for our style of cube specifically, where you want impact, you basically want impact on cards when you play those cards without like a tremendous amount of setup. I don't think this is going to get here for us. But if you're playing like a slower cube that's trying to line up more synergies and you're deliberately trying to do more fun combo stuff that might get run over if you were like playing a deck from your cube into a cube like ours. I think that there's, some things to be interested in here.
Okay, so I agree with all of that, but there is a part of me on this card that wonders, is this a 2-drop that your opponent is just contractually obligated to kill the turn you play it? Because, like, you untap with this card, right? And it kind of doesn't matter what you do with it, you're going to start generating value, right? And even say you don't do it on turn 3, say on turn 4 you play it 2-2-drops, you get a free 2-drop, you put one in suspend. Turn 5, you like get a 3-drop or something. We're playing blue, so we're restocking our hand off of card draw probably. There's a part of me that wonders if this is just like a ticking time bomb that also generates value along the way, and if you don't kill it, you're just going to die to it. I think I'm probably wrong, because like suspend 4 is a lot.
It's a long time.
But you do get the card when you flurry, right? You're getting like a copy of it now. It's not even like it's making you wait to get the card. You're just getting it now and then getting it again 4 turns from now. The body's probably a little too weak. It probably need to be like a 1-3 for me to really want to vibe with it. But I don't know. This strikes me as the kind of card that's probably bad, but you could show me a world where if you don't kill this on turn 2, you just lose to it. I don't know.
Maybe. It's matchup dependent, I think, because you're not double spelling on turn 2 without Mishra's Bauble, so like you're not flurrying on turn 2. The earliest you could actually even trigger this is turn 3 if you either played it on turn 2 or you go like this into like a 1-mana cantrip or something, and then like you're suspending a 1-mana spell, so it's probably not that explosive. And 4 turns from turn 3 is turn 7, so the earliest you're getting any dividends on this card is turn 7, and probably with like a 1-mana cantrip or something, which if you get to that point and it's like Tigum survived and I stored up all these suspend cards, sure, but like, are we really playing a vanilla 2/2 that's not doing anything relevant until turn 7? No. The one thing I wanted to point out here is that it does really cool things with Adventures and Omens, like split cards, because you can double spell, like on turn 4 you can go Tigum into a 2-mana Omen and suspend the card, and then when it comes off a suspend you can just cast the more expensive dragon or the adventure off of it. Like if you went this into Virtue of Persistence's adventure, you just tuck Virtue of Persistence away as a suspended card, and then you just get to cast Virtue of Persistence off of suspend. So it does cool stuff with split cards, but again, turn 7 is the earliest that you're seeing any dividends off of this. Some games don't even go to turn 7, so Prowess would have made this card for me, because then I could lean on 2-mana 2/2 Prowess as a good card, like we do with like some of the red hasty creatures, that have like upside but not really upside. But they didn't give this a keyword, so I'm just completely off of this. It's just a vanilla creature until turn 7, maybe, if you were double spelling.
It is kind of a very vulnerable enchantment at the end of the day, but it's a cool card.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Very cool. It feels like a mythic. I like that this is mythic. It has that mythic text box to it. This is a card that's, again, only here because I think it's really cool. Naga Fleshcrafter is 3 and a blue for a 0/0 snake shapeshifter, and it enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, so it's a traditional clone. The clones are just way, way better when they can copy any creature rather than just your own. That's all it does on the battlefield. It's just a clone, but it has a renew ability for 2 and a blue. You exile this creature from your graveyard, you put a +1/+1 counter on target non-legendary creature you control, and then all of your other creatures become a copy of that creature until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. So that reads to me as like big Simic, or maybe there's like some janky like aristocrat style thing you can do with a blood artist or something, but in a big like blue-green deck that has like chunky green creatures, being able to turn like all of your dorks into that chunky green creature until end of turn seems really cool. I'm kind of off of clone, like 4-mana clone as like a archetypal card for cubes. It just never seems like those play out like super powerfully or anything. But I thought the renew ability was really, really cool here. And it's worth noting, renew is just like, it's just flashback again. Like, it's just a different variant of flashback. It's funny that they gave us harmonize and renew. So like every renew card is a natural 2-for-1 in some sense, but cool card. Not for us. I can't imagine playing this in our cube over like Kefnet or some other, Enduring Curiosity or whatever, like in the 4-drop slot. But this was a really neat ability for them to tack on to the renew part here.
I love the art.
This is a really cool card, but it does. This also strikes me as another direct commander print, because this is clearly meant to be used in the Telval commander deck, right? The dragon spirit that makes when cards leave your graveyard, you get zombies, so you're making tokens, and you're in the big Simic pile that we can like copy a big dumb creature. and make all of our 2/2 zombies into a million of millions.
Yeah, Sultai has a mini theme of cards leaving your graveyard, like the whole quote-unquote grave break thing, and Renew obviously just plays like perfectly into that.
Man, wouldn't it have been cool if they had given us a really great Sultai card like that?
Yeah. This card also, I sort of want to try it in my my Wrath EDH deck, where I can turn a bunch of 1/1 tokens into a bunch of Psychosis Crawlers and then draw some cards.
You mentioned Commander twice, 3 and you're out.
Yeah, some interesting creature combo potential. I think you highlighted what it's going to be in most cubes that are not specifically trying to abuse some element of it. It just seems like probably just like a secret blue-green card that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you turn this in like to a Tovolar's Huntmaster or something, and suddenly all your creatures, including the wolf tokens, become like 6/6s for the turn.
Yeah, it's a cool card. Do you mind if I talk about this next one?
Yeah, I was going to ask who pitched this one as well. Hit us with the River Regent.
So this card is Meringue River Regent. It is 4 blue, and it's an omen. I'll read the creature half first. For 4 blue, you get a 6/7 flyer that when it ETBs, return up to 2 other target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. That would be a very mid-blue finisher card, I think, these days. But with 7 toughness, it's going to block basically everything, including like all large green creatures with reach or attack into them. And the bounce is okay, but like that's not a card we would even like begin to consider. But it also has an instant omen Coil and Catch, and it is Sift at instant. Draw 3 cards, then discard a card.
Also known as Reign of Revelation.
Yeah. There has been a instant speed of this version.
Yeah,
literally the card Reign of Revelation.
It's literally
with
Reign of Revelation with the Dragon Stable to it. Now my initial understanding of the Omen cards is that they were not like adventures and that you had to choose one or the other, but then Teld pointed out to me that it shuffles itself back into your deck.
Yes.
So basically, I was looking at this wrong. I was just like, oh, well, here's like a kind of a dopey blue finisher we could talk about if you're curating like a standard cube or something like that. You don't have like Gear Hulk and Whale's out of standard now too, right?
I don't know.
I don't know. Who knows? Standard goes back to like 1995 now. But anyway, the way that I was looking at this was like, oh, it's this big dumb dragon with this draw 4 on it, or like draw, like look at 4, draw 2, basically, that you get for 4 mana. But then like I was talking to Teld about it, and he was like, actually, it's the instant with like this stapled onto for you to like redraw later. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I started evaluating this as like a 4 mana draw 2, and I think as a 4 mana draw 2, it's definitely worth talking about, right?
How interested would you be in like Hieroglyphic Illumination or Chemister's Insight if you could instead cast it as a 6 mana 6/7 that bounce 2 creatures? Like I that's pretty big upside on the draw 2s to have an alternative that's just a giant like game winning threat.
Yeah, because the downside of card draw is that you're not in a spot where you can afford to spend mana to just spin your wheels. But this puts a giant thing into play and catches you up on board. I actually think that's, I don't want to say saying buyout sounds really weird on a 6 mana card, but it does sort of feel like it's a good alternative mode if you've gotten to later into the game where you don't want to be spending mana not impacting the board.
Right. So, I mean, actually, it's okay. So you mentioning that, the way that I guess I'm thinking about this is this, right? Later in the game, when you have 6 mana, you would probably be wanting to cast your 4 mana, look at a bunch of cards thing to try to find something like this to cast.
Yeah.
And then at an earlier point in the game, it's like if you hold up like this and a counter spell, then like, and I like the fact that, and again, Teld pointed out to me that this is what it does, peels 3 cards deeper into your deck and then puts itself back in there, which increases the likelihood you're going to redraw it to draw the finisher on the back end.
I was going to actually say something very similar, just the, most of the Omen cards, the idea I'm going to redraw them is kind of a pipe dream. But when you're sifting through like 10% of your deck every time you draw this to sift through, that's actually reasonably higher likelihood that you're going to redraw this at some point down the road. So I kind of like this card, but it does fill the 4 mana draw a card slot, not the 6 mana finisher. It's kind of in the vein of Lockwill, where we play Lockwill as a 2 mana next snap that draw, and that one's better because it just draws you the 6/6. But like, I think this is in that same vein, right?
I've been looking for a replacement for Shark Typhoon. This might actually be a good replacement for it. It doesn't do like the body thing that Shark Typhoon does, but
that
like,
is
the
a very
6 mana
good
play
shout.
is an actual real play.
Yep.
Yeah, the enchantment mode on Zark Typhoon is 99% of the time not a real card. So like, yeah, the 4-mana mode is a little worse than Shark Typhoon, but the hard cast mode is substantially better. So
all right, so we can swap out Shark Typhoon for Dragon Rain. I'm good with that.
also plays better with some of the way that the blue decks are currently constructed. I think maybe Shark Typhoon is just bad. I don't like that card very much.
I don't think it's very good anymore either.
It's fallen off.
If you think, yeah, I mean, I guess this, I mean, honestly, it's not 1-to-1, but in my mind, this is just kind of better than Shark Typhoon, right? Because when you're casting Shark Typhoon for cycling, for 3 mana, you're getting a 1/1 in cycle, and then for 4 mana, you're getting a 2/2 in cycle. This comparatively for 4 mana is Reign of Revelation, which is obviously like quite different, but then if you're in a situation to hard cast Shark Typhoon, like Shark Typhoon will often win the game, like if you're in a position to hardcast it, but if you're in a position to hardcast that, can't you just like hardcast this and just kill your opponent with it?
Yeah, and bounce some stuff too.
Yeah, you also get way more spots where you can hardcast this. And additionally, one of the things you're usually doing when you cycle Shark Typhoon is trying to find the Wrath or removal spell. And it turns out, I don't know if you gentlemen knew this, but digging 3 cards is more than 1.
It's more than 1. Yeah, I do like that as a shout. I was thinking about this versus like I was looking at this versus like Memory Deluge, but yeah, Shark Typhoon, it's really amazing like how much that card's fortunes have changed. I think maybe its time has come.
used to be like maybe the best control finisher in our environment, and now it's the worst of the ones we play.
When Shark Typhoon was printed, if you were, for whatever reason, a newer Magic player listening to this, it was like unreal how good that card was. It was, our mind is blown. This is the best blue card ever printed, like into standard in years.
Okay, hot take for the last blue card here. Maybe it's not a hot take, I don't know. Fresh Start is 1 in a blue for an uncommon aura with flash. It enchants a creature, and the creature gets -5/-0 and loses all abilities. We did not discuss this one for the Peasant Cube, because the Peasant Cube has so many like blink and pick up and sacrifice things to kind of like get out from underneath auras like this, or to like punk auras like this. But I think in the mainline cube, like at higher power level cubes, I think this card is just like Blue Doomblade. And I know like people make that joke all the time, but like I've been very impressed with Unable to Scream, which is the one that makes a creature a 0/2. If this was just -5/-0, I wouldn't care, but I think Unable to Scream has kind of taught me that like stripping a creature of abilities in addition to like nerfing its power is huge. Like that basically functionally kills the creature. And this has flash, so like it does play into what the strengths of our blue decks are doing right now. So I think this is probably as close to Blue Doomblade that we get. That isn't just a straight up counter spell, like being able to answer a resolve thing. Which I know, Chris, you've had some reservations against. Like, should blue be able to also just kill the creatures that are on board in addition to like killing them off the stack? And like there's some real conversation to be had here. But my hot take is that this is just an excellent blue removal spell that maybe it doesn't rival the counter spells necessarily, but this should play out very, very well in higher power level environments.
Yeah, I've wanted Dress Down on the client for a while, and I would much rather have Dress Down, just to be clear. I think that card is way sweeter, probably more powerful too, but just way sweeter of a card. But I do think that given how powerful Unable to Scream has been, we're supposed to look at these effects. And I think it's a fair criticism that blue getting access to these cards is a bit of an expansion of the color pie. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Every other color is getting to expand what they do. I don't see it being completely unreasonable that now blue has kind of some level of being able to interact favorably with creatures without having to go into other colors. It's not like you're going to play a mono blue deck anyways, but it just means that you're not having to guarantee dig, and it makes decks like Simic much more playable. I think it opens up the amount of playable combinations of colors in Magic.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I had a little bit of a problem with blue removal because like Simic is doing really well, and I was like, well, should blue be able to interact with creatures this way? And you correctly pointed out that like green has a lot of ways to interact with creatures as well, conditional on you having creatures. This strikes me as probably one of the better like blue creature interaction spells that we have yet seen. The category in general doesn't particularly excite me, but I think the card is good enough. I think if you're looking for blue creature solutions in your cubes, this is probably one of the better ones that you have access to. It's not Unable to Scream. That card's nuts.
Yeah, now this is conditional on you not having any sort of dedicated sack or bounce effect. We have a couple of sack effects floating around that can punk this card, but if you're really promoting those, like we're not like Tim said, we're not going to play this In our Peasant Cube, we do play Unable to Scream because that card is just blue swords to plowshares. And if you get got, you get got. But this card is a step down from that card, but still probably pretty good.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move off of blue then and ride into black here, which has probably the lion's share of like the most powerful cards, or like
black got pretty hooked up.
Yeah,
this is one of the coolest cards in the set that we're about to lead into.
Yeah, do you want to read it, Teld?
Yeah, so this is Rot Curse Rakshasha. So it's 1 in a black for a creature demon, no longer a cat demon. It's a 5/5 trampler with Decayed. So that is the can't block, and when it attacks at the end of combat, it sacks itself. It has a renew ability of X black black, exile this card from your graveyard, and then put a Decayed counter on each of X target creatures and activate only as a sorcery. So this card's really, really cool. I don't think it's good. I think not being able to block is just a death knell. I almost guaranteed death knell. However, it attacks for 5 damage, right? And your opponent's probably not going to block it because they're going to be trading off a creature early into the game. And then once it goes into the graveyard, you lava axe your opponent for 2 mana. And then you can at a later date use this to put a bunch of Decayed counters on your opponent's creatures, which not only opens up attacks for you, but it means if your opponent wants to swing back at you, they're going to lose their board. And that is honestly pretty powerful, to the point that I wonder if the way you're supposed to play this card is just to play like Malevolent Rumble and other mill effects and try to snipe it into your graveyard as opposed to actually casting this card. Because if you're, but it strikes me as the kind of card that if you're like a suicide black deck, we used to refer those as, the black decks that are just trying to use their life total as a resource and kill you as soon as possible, which we don't really see as much of. But if you're in that vein, this card's very good because you're, again, getting 2 mana lava axe into, falter effect down the road, which is probably worthwhile.
Before I give my thoughts on the card, does anyone think that this is anyone else feel like this is in part a general Radon reference? Massive, multiple limbs, rot curse, like Scarlet Rot from Elden Ring.
Oh, Elden Ring, Radon. Maybe,
yeah. Would this set have been in development when Elden Ring came out?
Elden Ring's been around for like 4 years now.
Has it been 4? Okay.
This would have been. He doesn't have the little donkey underneath him though, so.
No, I mean, they weren't. But like, I see this, and my first thought was like, Elden Ring came out. Yeah, Elden Ring is 3 years old now.
Okay.
Yeah, they would have overlapped probably.
Yeah, so just rot curse made me think of it as well. So like it anyway, it made me think about General Radon a little bit. This card is, I think, hot trash if you are not playing like a hyper aggressive deck. This is to Teld's point. This is a straight up black aggro card. I do like, Teld mentioned this, I do like that this can be like milled over and used as like basically like a giant falter later. I think the other thing that's kind of nice about it is, if you're playing like a black-white deck and you're making a lot of tokens and you decay your opponent's board, they won't be able to block, but you can also leave back enough like small tokens that'll just like chump their decayed creatures and effectively gives those tokens like a form of death touch in a way. My feeling is that we have a lot of really, really strong black 2-drops that are kind of good in most black shells that want creatures, and this is highly niche. And it might not be particularly good, but it is so wildly interesting to me that I do want to test it.
I think I'm there with you. It's just a very cool combination of effects here.
Yep. This is like an outside thing, but if you have instant speed sacrifice effects, just remember that just like Jadar's decayed tokens or anything decayed, if you exercise full control on the stack, you can wait until it's done its damage, and then you can still feed it to a sacrifice effect of some kind before it sacrifices itself. So my instinct is that this card is hyper-specific, but I just think it's super rad.
Yeah, people were talking about the newer Kaito ninjutsu planeswalker with this, where you play this on 2, hit him for 5, and then you ninjutsu before it sacrifices itself.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, if you can get this into the graveyard incidentally, like it's kind of a pseudo board wipe, but if any of your pressure in your opponent, like just decaying all their stuff, is probably game over. So there's some really cool takes here. And honestly, even if you are a super hyper aggressive card, you just play this on turn 2, hit him for 5, and then like you just keep adding to the board with other stuff like that. That's 25% of their life total done from their 2-drop. So I think that justifies itself enough if you are being proactive. So very, very, very cool card.
Would you like to discuss a much easier to grok and obviously powerful card, Chris?
Yeah, this one is Sinkhole Surveyor, and this is such a Chris card, I think. Sinkhole Surveyor is 1 and a black for a 1/3 flyer, and then whenever it attacks, you lose 1 life, and this creature endures 1. So you can put a +1/+1 counter on it, or you can
Bitter
create
Blossom.
a 1/1. Yeah, it's
kind of.
Yeah,
not really.
Yeah, but Buzzard Blossom.
Hey.
But it's kind of funny. I was like, okay, Teld, I think this might be better than Ledger Shredder.
Yeah, we got the 1/3 bird stat line to be interesting to me.
Well, it's a scout now, but it's going to return to base to advise.
I just realized this is a scout bird, a bird scout. It's just a vulture that's like, sinkholes, yes.
Sinkholes, yes. This card's fucking rad. It's a 1/3 flyer, so in the early stages of the game, if you're playing like a mid-rangey style deck, it'll block dinky attackers, and then once you start attacking with it, it can either just go really tall. Like if you attack with this twice and make it like a 3/5, and then you find yourself on the back foot, you just leave a 3/5 flyer that you made for 2 on defense and block. But more likely than not, you're just gonna shit out a bunch of creatures with it to sacrifice our Anthem. It's just a really good card. This is what I was talking about with even this like Rot Curse Rakshasa. We were talking about how difficult it is to evaluate, but like the card's text is literally just trample, decay, and then this renew ability. Like there's a lot to consider in terms of what the card can do, but the text box itself is not complicated. And Sinkhole Surveyor is the same way. You've got optionality, you've got good keywords, you've got a variety of different things that it can do or contribute to, but it's all in a very simple text box. This is a very powerful card. This has got to be one of the better Black 2s I've ever seen.
Hear me out. Ornery Tumblewag.
I mean, like, yes. I mean, you're probably putting the +1 counter on this the first time at least, right? Because a 2/4 is just so much better than a 1/3, and then from there you have to make a decision of whether you're making the 1/1 or not. But even in your Aristocrat style deck, you might just ignore the +1 counters altogether and be like, okay, I'm going to make a dude every turn or whatever. So, card's great. I mean, we don't really even have to talk about it much more beyond like,
nope, it's just good.
The card says how good it is on the card. Like, look at it.
Also, notably, this gets better just when it attacks.
Yes.
So if your opponent has like something that could have theoretically blocked it, it just gets bigger before
like a Ledger
attack.
Shredder, perhaps.
So like a Ledger Shredder, perhaps.
Like they just keep going tit for tat, same power and toughness, bouncing off of each other.
Yeah, that'd be. But this card's really good.
Well, no, you just attack with this twice, and it's suddenly bigger than Ledger Shredder.
Yeah, but your opponent's already put 2 counters on Ledger Shredder from all the double spelling that they did.
The double spelling they did on turn 3 that we talked about was bad. Not happening with Titan.
We got a power creeper here, kind of. Vampire Nighthawk's already been power crept once, so I don't know what everybody's like getting all twisted about this card. But
are people getting really twisted up about this card?
No, they were like, "Oh, R.I.P. A Vampire Nighthawk," as if like Nighthawk Scavenger didn't already exist
wasn't
or
way better.
Who was playing Vampire Nighthawk? Is not playable in Peasant Cube.
I don't know where people like. I think people just forgot about Nighthawk Scavenger or something. But 1 black for a 3/3 vampire at rare. It has flying, death touch, and lifelink. So Vampire Nighthawk with an extra point of power for all you freaks out there who are still playing Vampire Nighthawk. Renew for 2 and a black. Exile it from your graveyard to put a flying counter, a death touch counter, and a lifelink counter on target creature. I mean, mid-range swap. We've debated a couple times about Nighthawk Scavenger being like in and out of our cube and stuff, and it usually comes down to like it's such a door against aggro decks because of how big it can get with lifelink and flying, and this doesn't have like that ceiling of like sometimes being a 6/3, but maybe the renewability is just. I mean, I would say the renewability definitely makes it like more of a consideration than Nighthawk Scavenger, because you just mill over it, discard it, whatever, play it as a 3-drop, trade it off because it has Death Touch, gain some life, and then later on turn something else into a Vampire Nighthawk. I kind of like the versatility of that versus like the big stats on Nighthawk Scavenger personally.
I'm with you on that. People seem to underestimate how often that Nighthawk is just like a 5/3 lifelinker. It happens a lot. Actually, what's kind of interesting about this too is it's like a Vampire Nighthawk Hawk variant that doesn't necessarily get as like massively swingy as the Scavenger does, but like this is a card that you also want to deal with exile removal, especially if your opponent is on like red black mid-range slop and they're just like, okay, here's my Inferno Titan, now here's my flying lifelinking Inferno
Oh, you went
Titan.
straight for Inferno Titan? Jesus Christ, man. I was like, what if we put this on like Bloodstained Champion or something? Like that's just fine as extra value. And you're like Inferno Titan with flying and lifelink.
Yeah.
Oh, and Death Touch on Inferno Titan. Oh my god. Boop boop boop.
Need to throw the obligatory. This is pretty mid into control, but like it's not as bad as the Rakshasha, but it's definitely does not inspire joy against control decks.
I mean, renew can't be countered by traditional counter spells, so you do get some sort of value off of it if you have like anything on board.
Yeah. If you've got a creature in play, sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a 3-drop that doesn't say it can't be countered, so obviously like counter spells are gonna get it. But I don't know. Are we doing that with 3-drops now too? Like my 3-drop's not good enough because it gets countered. I don't know.
Well, it's more just that it doesn't generate. It's an entirely combat-oriented card that doesn't generate value or snowball. Like, against your control deck, it doesn't matter if your life total gets up to 30, they're still going to kill you eventually. Not trying to pan the card, just, have to throw that in on every single card that doesn't generate value.
All right, another 3-drop here. Avenger of the Fallen, 2 and a black for a 2/4 human warrior with Death Touch and Mobilize X, where X is the number of creatures in your graveyard. First and foremost, what is happening in the art here? I've looked at it blown up and everything. I don't get it. I don't get what's happening here.
I guess it's walking towards some kind of like funeral pyre on stakes, like
and tossing an electric sword into it for some reason.
I don't
get the narrative of what's going on in this.
I don't think there is one. This is unfortunately a miss on the art, which is a shame because this is a very, very playable black 3-drop.
Yeah, so, I mean, let's talk about it. I guess we have to talk about it a little bit in relation to Preacher of the Schism, which is, same stat line, also Death Touch, but has, like, a different sort of attack trigger on it. This seems, like, way more fair than Preacher of the Schism, but also has, like, a way higher ceiling if you are filling up your graveyard, right? This could say Mobilize 5 on it, which is insane. Like, just make 5 1/1s. It's not going to say that every time. I suspect Mobilize 1 or 2 will be pretty easy to get to, and because of Death Touch, like it's always going to trade for something, whether that's a removal spell or just some number of creatures in combat. 2 power on Death Touchers we've noticed has been good because sometimes you have to gang block it with 2 2/2s and lose them both. This card does not strike me as immediately like broken or amazing, probably worse than Preacher of the Schism, but I feel like there's a high enough upside here and a high enough floor to justify playing this as a black 3-drop.
Yeah, this is really potent. Preacher is, I think, a stronger cube card insofar as like you just put Preacher in literally any black deck that wants a creature and it's going to be excellent, regardless of what you're doing. Avenger has a significantly higher ceiling with anthems and death triggers and sacrifice effects. I think that's kind of how I would summarize it. I think this card's very good. If you're already playing Preacher, it's probably not as generically good as Preacher, but also I don't see why you couldn't just play both, depending on what black 3s you're running and why you're running them.
It's a lot of Jundi energy with this and the Carsey Revenant before it and stuff like that.
Exactly, but this has, I mean, if the game is worn on for a little while, like this is really sick in conjunction with like Ellis Core. Like every time you attack, you're just going to get life gain triggers for every token that this makes, and then when they all get sacrificed. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to like here. I assume that we're going to test this. We cut Preacher a while back because black midrange was just feeling way too good. This asks for more from your deck. It doesn't give you card advantage, and it doesn't give you permanent board presence. So this is definitely a more aggressively oriented card, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting the obviously if you're not really mobilizing at all with it, it's probably a little awkward, and you're gonna have to find a way to get something out of that mobilizing. But I've been a big fan of any card that encourages you to put black cards and Malevolent Rumble in your deck. I don't know if this does, but we'll see.
Yeah, black green could use more stuff like this to incentivize you doing like a creature heavy build.
It's just nice to have black cards that care about your graveyard in general, but aren't like so specifically synergistic to the graveyard that like you have to achieve. If you're only getting like 2 tokens when you attack off of this, it's still like a pretty strong card, right? And then the ceiling is just higher from there.
Yeah, notably Troll of Khazad-dûm the land cyclers, being able
Yeah.
to dump those early and easily into your graveyard. Very, very good. We don't have a ton of black cards that intrinsically have a bunch of graveyard synergy, but
Not anymore. No.
I could see some weird. If this card is actually good, I could see this card making its way into some interesting builds. But I suspect the most likely thing is you're probably just going to try to get it to mobilize 1 or 2 and just be able to, generate a little extra value with your Blood Artist or your Vrain or your, whatever. And but there's a lot of cards that care about that. There's all the like Enduring Innocence and Enduring Curiosity, I guess, with the looters and stuff, as well as the red cards. So yeah, I think there's enough play here for this card to be good. And there's occasions where I could see this being, you got 5 or 6 creatures in your graveyard and it's ridiculous.
Should be happy if it ever hits mobilize 2 on like a regular clip.
That's what I'm thinking. That's where you want to be. Yep.
Yeah. Chris, did you add Scavenger Regent here? You mentioned this briefly earlier.
I did. So Scavenger Regent, I really like this art. It's very like sort of monochromatic, but they've done a really good job of sort of balancing the colors and making it look detailed. But anyway, Scavenger Regent is 3 and a black. For 4/4 flying dragon with ward, discard a card, that's just like a fine mid-range creature. Honestly, decent sized flyer, ward, discard a card is, a thing. It has an omen on it, exude toxic, X black. Each non-dragon creature gets -X until end of turn. Notably, if you do the sorcery omen, you put this back in your deck. So this kind of has like some Rakdos mid-range vibes to me. Like if you have it in your opening hand, you can wait till your opponent commits to the board. You can do like a mini sweep, and then later in the game, like the mini sweep should get you deeper into the game without dying. You can redraw this. I think it's fine into control. If they want to remove it, they have to 2-for-1 themselves. It's large enough to block most aggressive creatures. And I don't like that this feels more effective against like the small ball creature decks that already sort of struggle into black than it does against the things. But the other thing is, like, black decks tend to have good grind against control, right? So I actually think that this is just, like, it's another example of what I was talking about earlier, which is, like, this card doesn't have a whole lot of fancy text on it, but all of the pieces kind of come together to be, like, a nice black mid-range piece for me. And, like, we've cut Yawgmoth for just being entirely too powerful, and we don't play Shieldred because it is way too generically powerful, and I've been kind of on the lookout for, like, we don't play Kalitas, Trader of Get, not because it's not good, but because it absolutely savages aggressive decks and doesn't really do very much into controlling decks. So I've been kind of like looking for another black 5-drop that I think is, or 4-drop that I think is just kind of good all around without being nuts, and I think that this fits that bill for me.
Yeah, I like it. It's a decent split card, like not an exciting creature, but a perfectly fine creature. Not an exciting sweeper, but a perfectly fine sweeper. Though, like, kind of worse than Crux of Fate most of the time. Though sometimes better if you're sweeping, like, 1 toughness creatures or whatever. So,
right.
This is a cool little split card. I mean, it puts 2 things in your deck that you're probably interested in casting, and you can adjust, whatever you need to do when the card's actually in your hand, depending on what the situation is. So I like it. It's more mid-range slop to go with the last couple cards we talked about, but there's nothing wrong with mid-range slop,
No, I like this card quite a bit. If you're a cuber who doesn't have power level concerns with like Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, and Shieldred, then you probably don't have room for this. I would describe this as like a mid-power black mid-range drop, but we happen to be in the market for one. So if you are also in the market for one, I think that this is worth looking at.
Teld, any thoughts on the Scavenger Regent before we get it into a peasant card here?
Just that the most common thing on the Wrath is like 4 mana -2/2 mini sweeper effect is going to be obviously better against some decks than others. I think it's a little bit of a boring card, but it's a totally fine black 4.
Yeah, the sweeper read's not great, obviously, but like Meat Hook Massacre was the same setup, and often we found ourselves sweeping entire boards with that. So like it's effective. It's effective enough, I should say. Obviously, Meat Hook Massacre has other stuff going on, but not to make the direct comparison. So next card here, one we talked about pretty extensively for the Peasant Cube. This is Desperate Measures. It's a single black mana for an uncommon instant. Target creature gets +1/-1 until end of turn. When it dies under your control this turn, draw 2 cards. So the immediate comparison being kind of Village Rites, right? If you target your own 1 toughness creature, or you target something that's about to die anyway, either in combat or getting hit by a removal spell, like this will occupy the same kind of slot as Village Rites while not being like as versatile. You can't just be like, okay, my I'm going to sacrifice my 2/2 creature and draw 2 cards. You can't do that. But it also doubles as a really, really small ball removal spell, in particular against things like Land of War Elves and stuff like that, like some of these small dorks that come down on turn 1. We don't actually have a ton of 1 toughness creatures floating around because we're not like super heavy on like the Savannah Lions and stuff like this. But I think a card that's going to be Village Rites, let's say 75% of the time, like there will be times where it's not Village Rites, you would rather have that, but a card that's going to be Village Rites a pretty large percentage of the time that can also kind of influence combat against your opponent's creatures or pick off things like Land of War Elves. I think that's a really sweet design, really cool space that they're working with here. And Village Rites not a super popular card to begin with. It's very narrow what decks it goes in. I feel like this could go in more decks. I feel
agree.
like this is like not a direct upgrade to Village Rites, but for the most part should be better than that card has been.
I do think it's better. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Teld, if I'm missing something obvious here, but like the only time that you would want Village Rites over this is if you were in a situation where like on end step you just needed to see some more cards and you were going to sacrifice something that you weren't really using anyway. But Village
against
Rites would
exile removal, it doesn't work against exile removal or bounce or something like that because the creature won't die.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. So there's some marginal cases, but like most of the time, unless I'm literally trying to sacrifice something that doesn't die from getting -1, and I'm not doing that in response to removal, I think this is just generally better. We have a lot of 2/1 flyers. It snipes those. It snipes dorks. Yeah, it gets some stuff. But then the other thing is, like, if I'm swinging all out in combat, like, occasionally you're going to align blocks just like, okay, well, my 3 toughness creature can eat that, like, 2 power creature. And they'll line up their blocks in a certain way that might have been suboptimal if you have this, and then you can use this as kind of like a combat trick that trades up on cards, too. So, yeah, Village Rites is one of those cards that, like, if I build a very heavily black, aggressive, sacrifice-oriented deck, and I get, like, every single card I could have conceivably asked for, sometimes, like, even though I'm in the deck that wants the Village Rites, like, if I'm like, man, I really don't want to go believe, like, 5 pieces of removal, and all of these other synergistic pieces in my deck are all, like, so good that I don't want to cut any of them, sometimes Village Rites will get cut from a pile that it's theoretically in the cube to support. I think Desperate Measures is a card that I could see, like, A, getting started more, but B, also somebody being more likely to bring out of their sideboard than Village Rites in some matchups. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, because there's nothing your opponent's going to do, for the most part, that's going to sway you to put Village Rites in. Unless they're, like, really removal heavy or something, you might do that. But, like, you would make that same consideration for this card while also being like, okay, my opponent's playing Malcolm and Plume Creed Escort. I'm going to bring this, like, X1 hate in, which you wouldn't do with Village Rites.
Yeah, and there's a few specific cards. Like, I know you said there's not a lot of 1 toughness creatures, but you guys talked me up a lot on this card in the Peasant Cube, which I was kind of like coping on Village Rites a little bit. Not that I think it was great, but just that I was a little more concerned about when this card doesn't do the Village Rites thing. But I think you're right that 95% of the time it's going to do that, because you almost always want to sack a 1 toughness creature anyways, or a creature that's getting targeted by a removal spell. But I think the 1 toughness creatures here that it kills is so important. I mean, just to go through a very, very short list of relevant cards: Intrepid Adversary with the trigger on the stack, Luminarch Aspirant, Selfless Spirit if you need to open up other plays, Elite Spellbinder, Malcolm, every mana dork. Kellen especially too is like, if you go for the 3rd trigger or the 3rd thing on Kellen, you activate it and then you just use this in response, just blow your opponent out on mana.
That's huge for your Village Rites to be able to do that. Like, Village Rites could never do that, and this card can. Like, that's huge.
Yeah, Seer Slicer Goblin, Deep Cavern Bats. I mean, there are a lot of cards in this cube that are 1 toughness that you just kind of have to kill. You're just contractually obligated, or you're going to get rolled by them. And the fact that you get to do this on a card that also flexibly acts as a combat trick and flexibly acts as a Village Rites effect, and can do both of those things, right? It can be combat trick, like your opponent blocks Phelan onto your 3 toughness or your 3/3 or something, and you pump it up and get to actually trade up on Phelan is wild.
And draw 2 cards, yeah.
Yeah. So there are a lot of good plays with this card, and I think this card's going to get started in spots, like you said, that Village Rites wouldn't, because this is a removal spell that, while it's a little narrow, the cards that it does kill are often cards that are 1 and 2 mana effects that will snowball the game very heavily. So I think that is a huge amount of play, especially for your black mid-range decks or your black sack decks. Like, you don't want the green deck being able to get off to their fast start. The way you lose to green in these mid-range piles, they resolve a dork and then play a 3-drop on turn 2. And if you get to play this on turn 1 and kill their dork, you're in a much, much better spot.
Yeah, and Chris, just to quote Danelius from the Peasant Cube, he said, "I never want to see Village Rites in a cube ever again now that this exists." So
Okay.
And he didn't even play Village Rites in his Peasant Cube, so he was pretty excited about this. Teld, it looks like you added a card to close out black for us here.
Yeah, so I added, it's technically a black-green card, but I slotted these in where I felt like we would include them. So it's Disruptive Stormbreed, which in the future we'll talk about this in the Peasant episode.
Peasant Cube's going out before this. It's already done, so we
excuse me, in the past we talked about this card already. All right, so for 1 and a black, you get a sorcery, destroy target creature with power 3 or less. And for 5 mana, 4 and a green, you get a 3/3 flyer that ETBs to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. This is a card that I don't think either side is super relevant in this cube, but there is a demand for more disenchants. You kind of always want more Doomblades. The Doomblade side of it is kind of like Virtue of Persistence, where the Doomblade side is fine enough. I don't think it's as good as Virtue, so you can make the argument that maybe we're not supposed to play it because of that. But I think getting an extra disenchant snuck into a cube that has pretty good fixing, like if we're going to keep the fetch lands and fixing is good, then I don't see why we wouldn't be able to splash a couple of green sources in our black mid-range deck to pick up a disenchant, which is potentially relevant for something like blue-black control, Grixis control shells, that sort of thing. I don't know if it gets there overall, but there are Great Hinge and Virtue Persistence type cards that you kind of have to answer or you die to, and this is another way of fitting in like a marginally playable card that also answers those effects if you need it to.
I don't have a strong opinion on this for the mainline cube. I do actually think green in particular is in a healthy spot with artifact enchantment removal right now. We've got like the frilled dinosaur thing that you can kick to destroy some. We've got Scrap Shooter. We've got the Web Strike Elite, I think is what it's called, with the channel ability. We've got Boseiju that's still in the queue. Like, that's 4 cards I just rattled off in green that could kill artifacts or enchantments. So, like, I think that's a healthy number to have for a queue.
Notably, all of those require a heavy green commitment. They all require, like, 2 green pips, right? So, like, this is a card that I'm presuming would be a black card that you would be splashing for the green effect.
Yeah, exactly. Which I don't know. Like, the removal spell is decent if it lines up against something that costs 2 or 3 mana. But our black removal is really strong, so I don't know like where the give would be for something like this. Maybe at 450 we could test it. I don't think this quite gets there on either half of the card. Maybe it comes together as a full card. I'm not sure, but I don't have a strong opinion about these uncommon dragons at a higher power level. I know we talked about a lot of them for the Peasant Cube. All right, let's go ahead and move into red here. We had a couple red 1-drops that we were, debating, talking about so much, but the conversation was just going to be that we don't really like these cards very much. So we decided to skip over those right into the 2-drops here with Shocking Sharpshooter.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, card's really sweet. 1 in a red for a 1/3 uncommon reach creature. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent. So we've got another of these Molten Gatekeeper, War Leader's Call, Impact Tremors, Perforos style cards. They have been... We gushed about this a little bit in the Peasant Cube episode. Teld and I did, at least, because we think this text box is just very, very powerful in Magic in general. And, like, they just keep slapping it on the thing. So, like, the more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. I think these cards play very well. This one would be like the concern would be like, what red 2-drop would get cut to play this? And I don't know what the answer to that question is right now, but I love that text box. The creatures come in and ping your opponent. I think that plays very, very well in a variety of red decks.
In the Peasant Cube, I was enamored by this card. Here in the main line, I'm a little more hesitant about it, partly just because cards oftentimes don't make that transition up. Some of them do. But more importantly is it's kind of a bad let me rephrase that. It is a bad 2-drop. Like, on curve, it does not do anything. You're probably not doing any damage with this card attacking. It doesn't block super well, though reach does mean it blocks Malcolm and Fairy Mastermind, which is nothing. And it's also a terrible top deck. because you're out of gas, right?
Yeah.
So you really need to make sure that you're getting there on your synergies and kind of the mid-game cards you're playing. And I'm not sure how often it's going to do that. I don't know, because if you're able to, put 5 creatures into play or something that's going to do more damage than your average 2-drop does in a lot of games. I don't know. I don't think this makes the jump off the stat line. I think it needed to be something like, what's the commander one from Bloomburrow that offsprings a dude?
Agate Inspector or something like that.
Yeah. That's basically this card, but you can pay some extra mana to get 2 of them, which is probably good enough to just get over there. But I'm not convinced that this card quite gets there in the mainline cube, as it isn't a particularly good early or late game card. It's just kind of an okay mid game card if our synergies line up.
I agree with that. I think that this... I'm in love with this design because I've been bitching for years that, like, Boros should have, like, a rare 2-drop, like a red and a white that has this text box on it, but also has, like, a combat-relevant body as well, to kind of marry up the 2 concepts that weld Boros well together. But I think I agree, like, at uncommon as a 1/3 reach, like, I'm excited about Impact Tremors on a creature if the creature is combat worthy. But if it's not combat worthy, it's kind of just Impact Tremors that can block. It's good in decks that have repeated ways to generate tokens, right? So you're not completely dependent on following this up with, like, the nut draw of, like, more creatures, right? Obviously, like, with the black card that mobilizes equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard or whatever, this can do a lot of damage. It makes Adeline better. Going, like, the white 2-drop that spits out 2 tokens and then, like, playing this and, like, a dude on turn 3 is, like, a really powerful line. But in a vacuum, I think the body itself needs to be a little stronger than this to make it at rare. So probably not for us. It's just I'm excited about this design, and I'd like to see, like, a powered up version of it for rare cubes on a go forward, because I like cards that make red synergize better with making tokens, because I think that makes red tie better into black and white.
Yeah, if you, like, flip the stat line, and I would be down to clown, because then it's just like your opponent doesn't play a 2-drop or you have a removal spell, you just get to smack them in the face for 3 damage.
Right.
But obviously that's not the card that the world we live in, or the card we got.
So this card probably doesn't make it, but push this type of card. Next up, Tersa Light Shatter. One of the weirder cards in this set, as far as, like, what red guild is this supposed to play into? Maybe, like, TEMUR with the harmonized stuff, but whatever. It's a fine standalone card. It's 2 and a red for a 3/3 legendary orc wizard with haste. So 3 mana 3/3 haste. That's already a good starting point. When it enters, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. And whenever it attacks, if you have Threshold, 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you can exile a card at random for your graveyard, and you may play it for the remainder of that turn. So I think 3 mana 3/3 haste is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It shapes up your hand when it enters the battlefield. It doesn't get to do the Seasoned Pyromancer trick, so you do have to discard cards to draw cards. And then once you fill up your graveyard, every time it attacks, you get a free random card from your graveyard. You do have to pay for it, but you can play lands and stuff like that. So reads like a more fair Lelia to me. A Lelia that doesn't become like a 5/5 or 6/6 if it's left unchecked. Takes a little bit of work, but the ETB on top of being a good hasty threat seems rock solid to me. I'm not sure that it's doing anything super synergistic. I mean, that's not even true. Red decks do care about filling up their graveyard to some extent.
They can take advantage of it, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's going to have some, like, anti-synergy with, like, things like Kroxa and stuff that wants to, like, eat your graveyard. It might have a little bit of anti-synergy with Darcy that wants specific things in your graveyard. So, as always, when playing with cards that reference your graveyard in your deck, make sure that you're not overloading their ability to work simultaneously. But yeah, this is good. I like that if you have 2 cards to get rid of in your hand to filter, like, that's just good filtering, if you're not interested in those cards. But also the 2 cards that it puts in the yard get you closer to that 7, at which point you start recouping some of that value. So this doesn't strike me as, like, bananas, right? This isn't as strong as some red cards we're not running because we think they're too strong, but it seems solid.
Yeah, it's not Screaming Nemesis, but Screaming Nemesis also doesn't draw you cards and whatnot later in the game, so.
Yeah, also, can I run the curve of Mischievous Mystic into this in your aggro Izzet deck?
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a way to trigger that. I like this card. I think this is what I want to see more of, which is this card's like pretty good on curve, right? 3/3 haste is nothing to write home about, but it is totally fine. It's kind of the gold standard for what like bare minimum you expect out of your cards. The filtering is going to be reasonably powerful. If you've got an expensive spell and you're stuck on lands, you've got a bunch of lands in your hand, you get to filter those out, obviously. And then if you get to the late game, like it has some card advantage. I could see spots where you have a bunch of lands and 1 or 2 burn spells in your graveyard and you hit the burn spell and your opponent salts off, but whatever. That's just what it, I think the fact that if you draw it late, it can generate a little bit of advantage. And if you're able to sculpt your graveyard, right? If you get really, really late into the game and you've got a way to exile some cards out of your graveyard, right?
Delve away the lands or something.
While still having threshold after that.
Yeah. This is kind of Magic Christmas Land, admittedly, but you know, you could see some spots where you actually can generate decent card advantage off this. Blah, 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 bobble. Obviously good with that card.
You mean the late game.
No, the late game that our 3/3 haster wants to play into. I think most of the time this is a 3/3 haste that filters to, but that's good enough.
As Danelia said for the Peasant Cube, like the call-in card of the cards in this set is, options that don't demand to be played, but are just options if you want to play them. Like that's kind of a call-in card for a lot of cards in this set. Which I think applies to this next one as well. This is one I added. I don't know what your guys' take on it is. I don't know if we play it, but I thought it was a very cool kind of like direction for red. So Magnetic Hellkite. Very boring name for a random Khans Tarkir card, but whatever. It's just like a red dragon. 2 red for a 4/5 flying dragon. When it enters, destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. The controller searches for a basic land, puts it on the battlefield tapped with a stun counter on it, and then shuffle. So you get to downgrade one of their non-basics. That normally doesn't like cut them off a color or anything unless they're Persian, in which case they probably just lose the game. But you basically downgrade like their tri-land or their shock land into a basic. But that stun counter, I think, is actually kind of a big deal. It means they're just down a mana for the next turn without being just like straight up land destruction or something like that. And then they had the courtesy of making this a 4/5 for 4 instead of just like a 4/4, which is the difference between 4 and 5 still matters quite a bit. So again, more kind of Jun mid-rangey swap here, but as far as these like 4 mana non-synergistic dragons go, I thought that was a pretty cool design to be like, here's a little bit of land hate that also slows your opponent down on top of a respectable body. So yeah, I don't have a lot to say as far as like strategic elements. I thought this was just a cool design, the way that they made it land destruction without making it straight up like Stone Rain on a dragon or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're stalling 3 or 4 creature lands too, so if you're you can blow those up. I mean, there's play to that. Most decks are gonna be running non-basic, so you're probably in most cases going to get to hit your opponent with the tempo stun, and that is very, very powerful. I think early into the game, especially, you play this on curve. On the play, right? And now your opponent has at most 3 mana on their next turn, which means if they probably have to kill this, which means they're not contributing to that. So like this card creates mini time walk scenarios and nice little mana advantages, and I like it. I don't think it's necessarily a must play or anything. It's a little boring, but the 4/5 stat line feels a good bit better. It means you can't Aganjo it. You can't block it with an ABZAN with Indestructible and just trade it off. So it attacks into a number more creatures. So pretty good card. I think you could go I could go either way on this. I think Rekindling Phoenix is fine, fits in, but this is sort of in the same spot, right? Of like 4 mana utility flyer, let's say.
Yeah, my viewpoint on this is that if your mana in your cube is such that this let's just go with like almost all of the time against most decks is going to have a target if you play it on curve. I think that's quite powerful, not just against the multicolor piles, but if your opponent is playing a 2-color aggressive deck. Like, one of the reasons that, and people forget about this until they play one, that they're like, well, I could go into both of these colors. Why wouldn't I just go monocolor? And then they like drop a game or two to, even though their mana base is good, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Occasionally, even against just like a 2-color aggressive deck, even though they get to replace the land with like the color that they most need from it, it still might jam them up. And then putting the stun counter on the destroyed land is obviously, like, even if you're not actually disrupting their color production because their mana is so good, sort of one turn stone raining them is strong. as you guys mentioned, this doesn't have enough like obvious synergies or bolsters like particular play patterns that I think we need out of red, that I'm going to advocate for finding like a spot for it, because the card doesn't interest me that much. But there is a lot of like solid power here, especially as like a Gruul card. You know, like as everyone well knows, if you're playing in a deck that can accelerate into effects that then go on to disrupt your opponent's mana, which was already behind yours, that can just be like back obliterating. If you're on the play and you go like Elf, good 2-drop, Magmatic Hellkite, and, you know, your opponent had, you know, just like their regular curve out, it's going to slow them down substantially, and the 4/5 is large. But this card doesn't like scream play me. If you like screwing with your opponent's lands, or you have a lot of dangerous utility lands, it's probably certainly worth considering.
So would this card be better or worse if instead of putting a stun counter, destroying a non-basic land, maybe it put, let's say, a burn counter on a land, and your opponent could either sacrifice their land or take 2 damage?
That would be really sweet.
Sounds like an alchemy design that I've seen before. Yeah, we can move on from it. I thought it's a really cool design. If you are in an environment where like mana is exceptional, like fetch plus triomes, and like you're trying to promote that while also having tools against like 5 color piles, I think this is a good consideration.
This would be a very funny card to add to the Desert Cube, I just want to say.
It would be.
Well, not to mention just one more thing, and then this might seem obvious, but it like gets all your opponent's creature lands in higher level environments. It also gets rid of like Cradle and Academy and stuff like that.
Thespian Stage, yeah.
Thespian Stage, Caracas. So like the Caracas, that type of stuff. So this strikes me as a card. It wouldn't shock me if they were like, let's try this in like the Vintage Cube.
I can see that.
Because it impacts like combo lands and stuff. Anyway.
Okay, so red spells, Channel Dragonfire. Quick discussion on this one. This is a single red mana for an uncommon sorcery that deals 2 damage to any target. It has Harmonize for 5 red, but remember that you can tap a creature to reduce the 5 part of that by that creature's power. So tap a 3-drop, this becomes... Or tap a 3/3 creature, this becomes 4 mana to, flash it back. So it's basically a riff on Firebolt, which is not a card we have on Arena right now. It's way more expensive on the back end unless you harmonize it, in which case sometimes it's less expensive. It is a sorcery speed shock as opposed to an instant speed shock. So that's kind of like all of the pluses and minuses of this card. It's really just a question of like, where does this land versus your other shock variants if you're playing things like Play with Fire. It's clearly, I think very clearly worse than Galvanic Burst Lightning, sorry, but it might be better than like Play with Fire or something like that. Like I don't want to like discount the fact that the Harmonize is just super expensive, because you can make that cheaper, and I think that is relevant.
I think this is just okay. I like this way less than Firebolt.
It's tier 2 shock. It's a tier 2 shock, right? Like,
yeah,
it's not amazing.
Fine, I guess. I do have a question of, do you think the Harmonize deals more damage or less damage than Tempting by the Ring from Ranger's Firebrand? Because I would not be surprised if Tempting by the Ring deals more damage.
I think Ranger's Firebrand is way better than this.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to go back and forth because I haven't really thought about that. My inclination is that this is better than Firebrand, but I don't have a strong enough justification to get into it right now in the middle of a review.
The thing that's so nice about Firebrand, and as you all know, I'm not a big fan of Tempted because it's just so specific in terms of its flavor, but what I've seen a lot with Ranger's Firebrand is, by the way, Ranger's Firebrand is like a sorcery that does 2 damage to any target, and then the ring tempts you. The play pattern that I see the most with Ranger's Firebrand is you give your ring bearer status to like a very cheap prowess creature, and then like you attack, blocks are assigned, and then you can pump up your prowess creature and just take that damage in.
Yeah, there are plenty of times, though, that you just fire off Firebrand with no creature on board, and then it's like, obviously, you would rather have the flashback mode of this or something. So that's where I'm like, there's pros and cons to both. Maybe the Ring Tempted comes up enough that it's better. You get more damage off of making, like, Kari Zev unblockable or something like that. But yeah, I think we can just, like, kind of file this under Tier 2 Shock, and we have Tier 1 Shocks in our format right now, so, like, it's a consideration that does not demand to be played, if I could, quote that one more time. Next up, we've got it's basically a red removal spell, but just kidding, it's a giant white dragon. So, Teld, you added a Twin Maw Stormbrood. This is the 5 and a white 5/4 flying dragon that enters the battlefield and gains 5 life. That's all secondary to the Omen here, which is 1 in a red for Charring Bite. It's a sorcery that deals 5 damage to target creature without flying, which you might also know as the card Roast. It is literally the same exact text as Roast, except sometimes you can cast it as a 6 mana 5/4 flying that gains 5 life. I feel like we've gotten to the point where we have better cards than Roast. As far as just the red removal spell goes, like Scorching Shot and all the deal 5s, Witchstalker Frenzy. Like, if we had Roast right now, I don't know that we would play it, but does... I guess, Teld, I would ask you, because you added the card here, do you think tacking on the big white dragon here as something extra gets Roast over the line?
Well, we're currently on a 3 mana deal 5, and this is a 2 mana deal 5. And again, I'm going to delve deep into my math. I'm going to delve deep into that math. That's a third less. I'm bad at math.
Outpace Oblivion does have extra text on it, though. It does shock your opponent.
It does shock your opponent. Yeah. I think that this card is just fine, right? Like, I think 2 mana deal 5 is just still a really, really good rate. I mean, obviously, being able to cast this as the dragon side is a not huge but not insignificant bonus that'll mostly come up in stuff like Naya Pile, like mostly green-red decks that you're splashing off a dork or something like that. I just think that 2 mana deal 5 when it comes to it is just still a super premium rate. Scorching Shots red. This is a very easy to cast spell, and sometimes you're gonna get to cast a big dumb dragon that gains you a bunch of life and kills your opponent.
Now you said in the Peasant Cube that you don't care that this can't hit flyers because most of the flyers in the Peasant Cube are 1 or 2 power creatures. That does feel like it matters way more here, though, that this can't hit flyers, right? Like, you couldn't hit ABZAN, you couldn't hit any of the blue flyers. Like, that feels like a huge downside to me for the higher power level cube. Maybe not huge, maybe that's exaggerating it, but like a noticeable downside.
It is definitely a downside, but if we go through the number of flyers that you actually care about, it's like Sarah Paragon, Archangel ABZAN, maybe Steel Seraph, and like Kefnet.
I mean, I want my red removal spell to be able to kill Elite Spellbinder if it comes down, like...
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point is I feel like it's about 8 creatures that you care about, which is not 0, right? I will acknowledge that is not, it isn't a complete whiff in terms, like at the Peasant Cube, I just don't care. Here it is downside, but also I still don't know how much I care. Maybe the cards you have to kill off this are so important to kill that you do really, really care. Though, if you're later in the game, like if we're past the point where Elite Spellbinder's doing its thing, and we're a little later into the game, if they're flyers, you can just cast a 6 mana 5/4 flyer that blocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as the green-black dragon for me, where it's like these uncommon ones don't get over the line for me because the creature halves don't, I don't know, they don't feel like they would sway games very much like they would in Peasant or Retail Limited or something like that. So, like, I don't have strong opinions about the card. I do think the removal spell's perfectly fine. I don't think we would play Roast if we had Roast right now.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe you're right just off the cards that it kills. I guess I see 2 mana at deal 5 and just am pretty enamored with it, given that we're still, and granted, Outpace Oblivion does have upsides, especially if we're adding the Kieran to the cube. But I really, really value that efficiency. So I acknowledge that sometimes you're going to get hit with oops, my removal spell doesn't kill something, but being able to kill a 5 toughness creature for 2 mana instead of 3 is a big deal.
Hey, if the Omen gets Spell Quellered and then you kill the Spell Queller, you get to cast the dragon for free. Who added Corey Steelcutter to the list? Because this, to me, is the most interesting card in the set to talk about.
I added this. I'm not sure how to feel about it, but it seems strong. I'll read it, and then I'll get into my thoughts. Corey Steelcutter is 1 in a red for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has +1/+1 and has trample and haste. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess, and you may attach this equipment to it. And then it has equip 1 in a red. This strikes me as a pretty obvious is it card, right? This card screams, please put cantrips in your deck with me, please. I think you only really have to auto-equip it once to get the value that you want out of it. Like, obviously, you wanna double spell with this, that's what you want to do. But later in the game, if you just have to pay the equip cost to put it on a creature that you played this turn to give it +1/+1 trample and haste, that doesn't seem like a raw deal on the equip cost. If it was like 3 to equip this, then it would be like, okay, dude. But the fact that this very clearly wants to be in a deck that has other prowess stuff in it and is interested in triggering that prowess stuff. So if we think that there's room, I think that this would be a cool, like, is it test card, basically. I could see it doing some stuff in red white too, but it does ask a lot.
The output on this strikes me as not great if all we're doing is cantripping and making a couple of 1/1s. I don't necessarily think this card is terrible, but I think we're needing to do a little more with it. I think we're looking for some War Leaders Call Blood Artist style action here to really get this over. I also don't like that, unlike Clarion Spirit, you don't just get, like, sometimes you could just play Clarion Spirit on turn 2, right? You just plan to double spell on turn 3. If you play this on turn 2, it's pretty bad. And also, Trample and Haste is nice. 2 manas and the 1/1, but like, in the decks we're going to play this, how often is Trample going to matter when all we're getting is +1/+1? Unless we're getting Hazoret, most of our red creatures are probably pretty small.
Yeah, I feel you. No, this, like I said, everything about this card screams that it wants to be in a deck that has some prowess stuff going on with it already.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the monks have prowess, though. Okay.
I
missed that.
Yeah. The monks themselves have prowess. This triggers prowess, and trample is a good keyword to put on prowess creatures if you are consistently prowessing them. All of that being said, as I mention all this stuff out loud, like, I think this card has the potential to be powerful, but I think that it's going to ask a lot of what your deck is doing, and I think it specifically wants a bunch of cheap cantrips. I think this is an is it card.
Okay. I'm going to slightly revise my opinion that this is better than I initially was saying, because I didn't realize the monks had prowess. I missed that line.
Yeah, it makes monastery mentor things. I kept going back and forth on this because I think the comparison to Clarion Spirit is really interesting because, like you said, you can run out Clarion Spirit on turn 2 and then on turn 3 try to double spell. But assuming you're never just blocking with your Clarion Spirit, which you don't do that often, you could trade it for a 2/2 or something. If you play Corey Steelcutter on turn 2 and then on turn 3 you double spell the same way you would with Clarion Spirit, you just have a better Clarion Spirit now, right? Because it's a 2/2 with haste. It's basically what Clarion Spirit would have been, but now it has prowess and haste and trample as well. You don't make flying tokens, which I think are better than 1/1 prowess tokens, but you do get random 2/2 haste creatures with prowess along the way, and then like Chris said, you also just have a piece of equipment that does something with your mana later in the game. The thing that gets me, though, is it doesn't just make 2/2 monks, right? Because if you flurry and you make a new monk and attach this to that creature, you're now taking the equipment off of the old creature, and that's a 1/1 monk, right? So, like,
well, you probably got a prowess trigger.
Well, you
right?
you got a bunch of prowess triggers, right? But the new token you made didn't get prowess triggers because you cast those spells before you made the new prowess token. So you just have a 2/2 sitting there. So, like, how many turns in a game are you like casting 3 or 4 non-creature spell? Like, basically never. Right. So, I think there's something to this card as like, and the thing that sells me is that, like, all the Clarion Spirit stuff aside, you still just have a piece of equipment that, like, in your Boros deck at some point, you're in top deck mode and you draw Inti off the top, and it's like, okay, now I have this piece of equipment that did some stuff earlier in the game, and now I can just use it as actual equipment and attack with Inti right away or attack with whatever right away. So I think there's actually something to this card. It's just hard to, like, kind of pan out how the flurry part of it's all going to work out. I mean, if you just play this on turn 3 and follow up with a 1-drop, that's good, right? You made a 2/2 prowess, you put a piece of equipment on the board, and you double spelled that turn. So, like, in those Is It decks that can do stuff like this, seems like a very powerful card. They kill the 2/2 prowess, you potentially just make another one later on down the line. That seems strong to me.
Yeah, in that case, you basically just played the Ember Hearth Challenger, right? A 2-mana 2/2 prowess haste.
But you have a piece of equipment sitting on board with extra utility, and you have the potential to make another Ember Heart Challenger later on down the line.
No, I agree with you. I just mean that, like, that card is not unreasonable. I guess you don't get the prowess trigger to make it a 3/3 that turn, probably. Yeah. But I meant that as a favorable comparison.
Yeah.
You're getting a playable card out of the deal, and if you can trigger it multiple times, that's fine. Honest question, how close are we to breaking Singleton on Mishra's Bauble?
No.
0%.
Four baubles and then everything gets broken, yeah. So yeah, I'll just to cut the conversation on red here, like this card has potential. I would like to try it out personally. I'm not
Okay.
100% sold how good it actually is though. And that moves us into green. The first green card, Surak Elusive Hunter, is 2 and a green for a 4/3 legendary human warrior. It can't be countered. It has trample. And it says whenever a creature you control or a creature spell you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. So control hoser already. There's the sneaky text in there is basically saying if your opponent counters one of your spells, you get to draw a card. And then if they target any of your creatures with anything at all, you just draw a card. So
no, this is better than that.
I'm sorry.
It works with reprieve. It works with reprieve too.
Yeah, if they target your spells on the stack, you draw a card, and if they target the creatures you control with spells, you draw a card. And then it is just a 4/3 trample for 3 as well. The only thing I want to add to this is that for cubes that have it, if you play this card and your opponent plays Orcish Bowmasters, they kill you on the spot. You just lose the game instantaneously, and there's nothing you can do about it if you don't have removal. So in cubes that have Orcish Bowmasters, maybe don't run your Surak into it because you will lose on the spot. So that weird interaction aside, just a rock solid green 3-drop. Like a little bit of control hoser text there. Not enough to be like the blue deck just can't operate, but it is very strong, and it even feels like an upgrade to that Soul Spinner card we got from Foundations.
This card seems fantastic and fills a hole that Greens had for a while, but to the point that I actually think this card's a little concerning, only because right now there's this, like, green is very good, but the blue decks can get over on green. I don't know if one card's going to completely flip that matchup, but we saw a ways back with Radagast that sometimes that's the case, where if your green deck had Radagast, you could just grind out the blue decks if it ever resolved. And I could see this being kind of similar, where your opponent doesn't get a chance to interact with it, and now they have to kill this before they can touch any of your other stuff. So it's kind of like an upgraded version of a Pop Hatch Recruit, right? That it discouraged your opponent from interacting with your creatures.
Mm.
I'm actually going to say the opposite of what I usually say, where I'm usually like, oh, it's a 4/3, but it should be a 3/4. I actually like that this is a 4/3, because if it was a 3/4, it's clearly like the can't be countered text is blue targeted. The card draw, if your creature spells are targeted with counters, is targeted against blue, which I think is the weak matchup. But if this was like a 3/4 that had that trigger ability on like target from removal, I think it would also be a bigger pain in the ass for the aggressive decks, because you couldn't just like force them to trade with you by pushing a bunch of damage, and the red decks wouldn't be able to remove it as easily. So I actually do like that they have that slightly more combat fragile stat line, so it's not just like a brick wall against aggressive decks too.
Yeah, it would also be a huge flavor fail, because Surak is the leader of the TEMUR clan.
Oh,
and,
okay.
He is the man who punches bears and gets ferocious off of it.
Yeah,
So
it's
the old
bear.
the 4 power matters. Yeah, he had to be 4 power.
Plus, Harmonize wants them to have the higher power creatures in the first place. So,
Yep.
yeah, the design makes sense, and this should just be a like rock solid green card, while also probably significantly improving the matchup against blue. So.
Yeah, my only real complaint about this card is that they didn't put a a blue-red activated ability on it, so that you could play it as your TEMUR commander.
Nah, we don't need all that. We don't need all that. Another green 3-drop here, Warden of the Grove.
Yeah. So it's two and a green for a 2/2 Hydra. At the beginning of your end step, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then whenever another non-token creature you control enters, it endures X, where X is the number of counters on this creature. And as a reminder, endure is you put that many +1/+1 counters on it, or you make that many you make like a creature token equivalent in size. One thing I really love about this art is like the perspective kind of gives it the vibe of this like kind of deadly bouquet of flowers. Like it's a head-on perspective, and it seems to be sitting on some kind of like magma crack or something. I don't know. It kind of looks like a deadly flowering plant, and that's cool to me. But I also like this card because, as we've mentioned repeatedly,
it's really freaking good.
Yeah, well, it's really freaking good. But I also like green cards that can interact with either upsizing things or going wide, because it gives them utility. And like, I like I like these cards that care about either counters or tokens or both, because they both have value as make giant stuff, or they have value as make your tokens bigger, or both. And I like this as something that will fit very well into a Selesnya deck, but will also fit very well into a Gruul deck. Like this card just screams Naya to me. It has super hardcore Naya vibes.
Yeah, the card's clearly very powerful, and then if you follow it up with anything like even not even follow up, but on the same turn have Luminarch, Aspirin, Bristly Bill, Ornery Tumblewhat, like anything that can put a counter on this, it gets like extremely out of hand quickly, and
Bloated
it just does its
Contaminator.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I just want to mention this card and the last card actually. Just continue the number of cards and push down on the curve the number of cards that oops, you lose the game to Tyvar stand. That's already a thing, but usually it's on 4 drops, and these are 3 drops that I feel like if you Tyvar stand, you probably just win.
Yeah, this card you have like probably 1 shot to kill it, and if you fail to hit that shot, you're probably losing without a Wrath. I mean, it is just Nessun Courser the turn it comes down if you're not doing anything else. It's just 3 mana 3/3 the turn it comes down. It's even vulnerable to shock before the end step. So like the window is there, and there's enough ways to deal with it, but you got to take that window. You got to get it out of the way. Teld, did you add the Snake Ranger?
Don't think that was me.
No, I did. So Teld and I talked about this. So this is a Lacid Prowler, I'm assuming is how you pronounce that. 2 green for 5/5 Snake Ranger, which is a cool type. Whenever this creature enters, you may mill cards equal to the number of lands you control. And then it has Renew for 1 and a green. Exile this card from your graveyard. Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. Activate only as a sorcery. This struck me as like an okay value card. Just, it's a 4 mana 5/5. You're going to mill some number of cards. If you have fetches in your cube, some lands will be in there, and then you get like a permanent for 2 mana. You get like a permanent size up on another creature. That seems fine. You probably have other options if you're playing like a tight 360. And the more we talked about it, the more we kind of realized like for lands combo decks and Commander, this is going to be really, really strong. Or lands combo if you have it in your cube in general. I was just looking at it as like a generic like 5/5 for 4 that when it dies, you're going to be able to exile it to get some size value into one of your other creatures, and that's probably fine, but not like exciting.
Yeah, I mean this just seems worse than Bristlebud Farmer as an example.
Oh, it definitely is if you're not doing like land.
Yeah, but if you're trying to like not play Bristlebud Farmer, you know, because the card's cracked, like you could play something like this instead. It's stats. Exactly. It's a lot of stats for pieces that come together.
100%. That's basically the whole deal with it.
Okay, green. I guess the last mono green card before we slog through a bunch of gold cards here. Herd Heirloom is 1 and a green for a rare artifact. It can tap to add 1 mana of any color that you can only use on a creature spell. Alternatively, you can tap it, and until end of turn, target creature you control with power 4 or greater gains trample, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. I'm pretty excited about this card. It's like a green specialized Mind Stone that only casts your creature spells. It is relevant that you can't use this on non-creature spells, but then like you get to just start drawing cards with your mana rock later on in the game. That seems like great utility on top of a card that's already going to get your 4 drops out on like turn 3. Like you're going to Quest and Beast on turn 3, and then you're going to start drawing a card every time Quest and Beast hits for the rest of the game. Like that seems excellent to me.
Also, so for some reason it's not activate only as a sorcery, so you can just wait until you go to combat, and if your opponent you wait until you know you're going to do damage.
Maybe it's like less consistent or less powerful than you think, and maybe you get got by the like restriction on the mana cost, but it also taps for any color. It's not just green, which is interesting. Correct. So
it's any color, and then it does the fun Mind Stone or like the enchantment based ramp, insofar as like if you go turn 1, like the most satisfying thing to do with stuff like this is to go turn 1 elf, and then you go like turn 2 play this and play another 2-cost spell, and you just are off to the races like immediately, spending 4 mana on turn 2, and then large creature, draw a card. I don't think there's a lot to say. I think it's really good. Unlike
Haven and Mindstone, this isn't restricted to one time either, right? You could use this over the course of a couple of turns to draw some extra cards potentially. It does need to be 4 or bigger, so that won't be especially as Magic gets more and more efficient, not necessarily going to be every creature in your deck, but there's ways to pump things. We've just talked about a couple, and there's quite a number. Green is a color that doesn't usually have problems meeting this sort of requirement, but it is something to mention.
I'd like to see more designs like this, like 2 mana rocks in specific colors that like do what the colors are trying to do, because they do that a lot with 3 mana rocks like Midnight Clock and stuff like that, but like at 2 mana you don't see this sort of stuff that often, so I would like to see territory like this explored more often. This is a very cool card.
Just wait till we get to Edges of Eternity and we get the red booster engine or something that makes taps for red and then does something crazy.
Yeah. Who wants to start off? I guess we've got 2 ABZAN cards to kick off the
Well, there's
the
actually
gold section.
3, and we should talk about them in a row. And first, let me say that I really wanted out of this set, because I don't play SULTAI a lot, but I have this very specific idea of SULTAI as like a grindy, like rampy value pile. They gave us 3 ABZAN cards that we could like easily consider. And it's like, oh, could you just have sacrificed one of these to give me the kind of SULTAI card that I wanted?
Yeah, there might be one actually I can tack on here, depending on the length of the conversation here.
Okay.
That might interest you, but let's go ahead and knock out the 3 ABZAN cards here.
Yeah, so this is my favorite of the ABZAN cards, I think. And this is Felithar, Dawn of the ABZAN. Cool name. So it's white, black, green for a 3/3 with trample, and when it enters or attacks, you may sacrifice a non-land permanent. When you do, put a +1 counter on each creature you control. So this just intersects on the ABZAN color pie, what they do mechanically and thematically, just super well. In terms of both flavor and in terms of gameplay design, where white, but your ABZAN decks are very frequently producing a lot of tokens or recursive creatures. You've got a lot of desire to maybe be able to sacrifice things for things like Blood Artist effects. It makes your board bigger and wider, just gives you that I will win eventually kind of vibe, especially if you're pairing it with recursive creatures and with tokens and really, spamming out a bunch of counters. I like this card a lot. I'm not 100% sure if it gets there, just because it does. I don't know if it necessarily wants to be played on curve, but it does want to be in kind of a proactive deck, right, to take advantage of all these. But I think it's a very cool card, and it's very thematically on point, and just really cool card. Like, I really like this card a lot.
As do I. It's obviously, like, I think it effectively needed to be a May, right? But thank God it is, because it's not always going to make sense for you to do this. But it's not, like, it asks more than some of the other just, like, straight up, like, oh, this is just an ABZAN card that, like, does a thing. But I'm not looking to just play 3-mana cards just because. I also don't feel like a compulsive need for every 3-mana color combination to have a 3-mana card. When we play a 3-mana card or a secret 3-mana card like Mr. Oliphant, I want that card to point to, if you are playing these 3 colors together, hey, this might tie some things that you can do with those 3 colors together into one coherent idea. And I think that ABZAN sharing a token's identity across all 3 colors, albeit leveraging them in different ways. What I really like about this card is, like, the sacrifice feels very black, and then the +1/+1 counter to your entire board feels very green-white. And yeah, I like this as a card that nods towards tokens, but it does have a very, like, black identity with the sacrifice. I'm a huge fan of this design.
It's cool, and it should play really well with those 2-for-1 style creatures like Thraben Inspector, Prosperous Innkeeper as an example. Just things that come with their own material that you can then sacrifice.
Bring back Doom Traveler.
It's Doom Traveler. Nested Shambler. Come back.
Few specific cards we've added too, like Grim Bauble, and occasionally you're not always 100% of the time able to flip Invasion of Ixalan. So if you have something like that sitting around, you can sometimes convert those into extra value.
Some
most
random
of the time
battles.
You're flipping, most of the time you're flipping those cards, but you're not always able to, or sometimes it's not something you necessarily want to do. And so you being able to convert those into a further advantage from, instead of just being a cantrip is always nice.
We should totally bring back Nested Shambler.
I mean, this card's insane with Nested Shambler, right? Because it pumps the Shambler, and then the Shambler spits out more things the higher power it goes.
Yeah, I'm only half joking.
We can talk about that. I'm not completely off of it. This is the type of card that really cares about that peasant mentality of, like, turn as many things as you can into permanents instead of instants and sorceries. So there might be some tweaks to make actually because of a card like this. But yeah, let's carry on with the rest of the ABZAN stuff here.
Next up is Severance Priest. So it's also white, black, green for a 3/3. This one, instead of trample, has Death Touch, and when it enters, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. If you do, exile that card, and then when it leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner creates a XX spirit creature token, where X is the mana value of the exiled card. This card, I think, is okay. It does obviously get rid of your opponent's best card. You're also not giving them a card back until they deal with it. So it's got the, it's kind of like that Eldrazi card, Thought Not Seer, I think is the name of it. They don't, in that they don't get their card back until they deal with the card. That being said, I've got like 2 major problems with this card. One is that if you're playing this early into the games, a lot of times you're playing these effects for tempo. So a lot of times, for example, when you play your Deep Cavern Bat, you're doing it just to disrupt your opponent's curve. Whereas this is more about dealing with something that presumably we can't actually answer, which is probably a more expensive card, which leads to the second problem of like the joke is we're supposed to use the Death Touch on this to trade off with a really good card, I think, or it eats a removal spell. But if we took like a Time Warp or something, and we, even if our opponent kills this, we just give them a 5/5, right? And sure, that's probably not as bad as getting Time Warped if they're ahead, or not as bad as getting Titan of Industry, but giving them a 7/7 is still not good.
Not great.
I think there's some awkwardness here in that you kind of are incentivized to take cheap cards despite the design of the card having me kind of want to take expensive cards to keep my opponent from casting them. But if you don't take the cheap removal spells, then they're just going to use it and get their big thing anyways. So I don't know. This strikes me as like we're playing 3 colors to get worse Deep Cavern Bats. That maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't actually think it is.
Maybe I shouldn't have added it. This kind of gives me, the more that we've talked about this, the more this gives me like constructed format vibes, where maybe in some more like eternal format, like you're nabbing like combo pieces or things where like it is relatively cheap, but it is also like integral to what their deck is supposed to be doing. But yeah, for cube, I'm sort of off of it. I think that the next thing for general cubes is more interesting to me, which I'll tell you what Teld said about it in a minute because it's funny. So it's Yathan Roadwatcher. It's 1 white, black, green. When this creature enters, if you cast it, mill 4 cards. It's a 3/3, by the way, 3/3 for 4. When it enters, if you cast it, mill 4 cards. When you do, return target creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Yeah, Teld, you had a question about this one, right?
Yeah. Why is this not a Sultai card? This feels like a Sultai card.
It feels like it should have been a Sultai card.
It could have been, but white, like Sultai doesn't return to the battlefield, so that they had to justify the white.
I forgot. ABZAN gets the good cards. That's why.
Forgot. ABZAN gets to do this and return to the battlefield. Sultai only gets to return to hand. So like the flavor's there, but like yeah, it's clearly like do we care about the self mill and ABZAN all of a sudden? Like probably not.
Maybe.
But I mean. You're paying 4 mana for potentially seven mana's worth of cards for like no, like you have to spike a creature, but how hard is that going to be when you're also getting a mill 4 on top of it? Probably not that hard. So I mean, I don't know, if you just play this and you get another 2-drop even, like I think you feel fine. You're playing a gold tax though, so like I don't know if it makes a cube slot for it, but it seems like a perfectly fine card to cast in anything that cares about building up board presence, as ABZAN decks tend to do. So.
This is a solid card, but this misses my sort of criteria for wanting to play a 3-color card in my cube, which is something like Felithar, which is like, hey, you want to go wide, like you confuse all 3 of the way that these colors are interacting with going wide into one cool package that feels like all of them. This is just like a value card.
Yeah, if this was just like a Golgari card, I'd be like super into it. But like, especially having Felithar is like, here's this ABZAN card we want to try out. Like, do we really want a bunch of ABZAN cards? Probably not.
That also reminds me, there actually is a 4th ABZAN card, which is so good. Yeah, I'm just going to jump to it right now, especially while Teld's away. So there was another ABZAN card that actually, this also fits kind of what I would like to be signaling as like what ABZAN is doing in our cube, the way that we have kind of token synergies in all of them. It's called Revival of the Ancestors. It is a saga. I do enjoy the art. It is 1 white, black, green for a 4-mana saga. The first chapter is create 3 1/1 white spirit creature tokens. So that's, what is it? Call the Hounds or whatever. Is
Captain's Call card or something like that.
Lingering Souls with flashback.
No flyers. No flyers.
No flyers.
Oh, these aren't.
No,
I've
these
been
don't
mentally inserting that these were flyers. Never mind. This card is way worse than I thought it was.
Literally 0 of the spirit tokens in this set have flying. They're all non-flyers.
Yeah, so it makes 3 1/1s, and then on your second turn it distributes 3 +1/+1 counters anywhere you want, and then the third chapter is all of your creatures gain trample and life.
Dude, if this made flying tokens, what the hell?
Look, it's Magic 2024.
This is less powerful, but I think this is also quite ABZAN-y, and it seems like decent. Anyway, not a whole lot else to say about that. The standout ABZAN card to me is Felithar.
Man, there's so many good gold cards. So we're going to say that a lot. We're going to repeat that a lot, that like the gold tax probably excludes it, but I don't want to exclude these cards from the review because like there are people out there who support 3-color stuff and like that. So that was kind of the big chunk of ABZAN. Do we want to do that for all the colors, is just like skip around and cover all the cards in the clan at the same time? I don't know if we need to do that or not, but maybe.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, we can do that then. So I'll kick off the TEMUR stuff here with a card that I think is really excellent, but again is maybe not a not for us card because of the structure of our cube. Song Crafter Mage is green, blue, red for a 3/2 human bard with flash. When it enters, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains Harmonize until end of turn, and the Harmonize cost is equal to its mana cost. So I think this is a very powerful card. I don't think it works quite in the context of our cube because we don't play a lot of expensive instants and sorceries. They're like, if you want to use a really strong example, we have something like, let's say, Sublime Epiphany is kind of like the go-to like flashback card. The thing that makes this card really good is that it contributes to its own like it contributes its own power to the Harmonize cost. And since this costs 3 and has a power of 3, you basically are just casting a spell from your graveyard while putting a 3/2 on board. So in the case of Sublime Epiphany, it's not like Snapcaster Mage where you have to pay an additional 6 mana on top of the cost of this creature. You just tap this to Harmonize, reduce the cost by 3, and you end up paying a total amount of 6 mana for Sublime Epiphany, which is what Sublime Epiphany costs. There are some quirks there. First off, your opponent could kill Songcrafter Mage in response to the targeting. So then you wouldn't be able to use Songcrafter Mage to actually cast that spell. You could, of course, tap a different creature you have on board. And then the thing that makes it like not for us is like outside of Sublime Epiphany, how many expensive spells do we actually play that would benefit from like a 3 mana cost reduction? Because the card to compare this to is Torrential Gearhulk. And like it might sound like completely ridiculous to make that comparison, but Torrential Gearhulk always costs 6 mana. Songcrafter Mage is a 3-drop that can make other cards cost 1 mana. You know, like a 4 mana draw spell, suddenly you're paying 4 mana total to put a 3/2 on board and cast your 4 mana draw spell out of your graveyard. That's something Gearhulk could never do before turn 6. So I think there's a lot of power in there. If you're in a cube that's playing things like Magma Opus or whatever, maybe Timeless Cube has stuff like that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but like for us, we don't play enough expensive spells that cost more than like 2 or 3 mana to really justify the spot for this. But I think in cubes that do have big, expensive, splashy spells, there's a lot of power packed into this card.
Yeah, I think the other thing to remember with this card is that there is a huge pip tax. This isn't just TEMUR mana. This is TEMUR plus the cost of the spell. So that in most of these cases, it's going to look something like green, red, blue, 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 right? Which is very difficult for a lot of decks to hit.
Yeah, which I think is really cool design because like it balances the effect of the card out. This has constructed chops, but at the same time, it's like very color intensive, and there's like a window of opportunity for your opponent to actually mess with it if you're planning on using this for the Harmonize. So, card I wanted to mention that doesn't make the cut for us, but I think is strong enough to bring up in the conversation.
Very funny card with TEMUR Sand as well.
There are 2 other TEMUR cards. One of them's not on the list, so I'm just gonna make sure that.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about the Saga real quick while you find that one.
Okay.
The Saga is Roar of Endless Song. It's 2 red, blue, green for a Saga. Chapter 1 and 2 are the same thing. Create a 5/5 elephant creature token. I'm kind of sold on power level there. Like 5 mana to make a 5/5 is not good enough, but you just get another 5/5 next turn. It's like, okay, sure, I'll take it. And then Chapter 3, double the power and toughness of each creature you control. They don't gain trample or anything like that, but like you just made 2 5/5s, and presumably on the second turn you got to cast some other stuff and put other creatures on board. So like this has like limited game ender vibes all over it. It's basically just Valgavoth's Onslaught like pumped up as a 5 mana spell. You know, Trumpet and Herd vibes if you want to compare it to like a lower rarity card, but like it's just 5 mana for 10/10 worth of stats across 2 bodies, and then like Chapter 3 just gives you an overrun on top of that. Card seems like just stupidly good to me. It's not a complete game ender in a high power level cube. Your opponent could sweep away your elephants. Chapter 3 ends up doing nothing, but like this is What is that white saga from Dominaria that made night tokens? History of Benalia?
History of Benalia, yeah.
This is like History of Benalia, but really, really big.
It's
real
History
big.
of Benalia, but it's green, so it gets to be a good card.
I don't even know if I would want to play this card if we cared to play a Temur card, but like it's just going to smash your opponent so freaking hard. But I wanted to mention it again.
How could you forget about Loot the Pathfinder?
I wanted to mention it on power level. It's definitely there on power level.
It is. The thing that bothers me about it a little bit is it doesn't feel like basically everything that's on here is stuff that just green can do. So it doesn't feel very like blue-red to me.
That's actually one of my only criticisms of cons as a whole, is it sort of feels like 4 of the clans are just exactly what their colors are doing, and then Temur is just green, but like we had to have other colors.
Yeah. Oh, they struggle. Temur's a weird combination. They sort of struggle with that. Like even if you look at Loot, like Loot feels very Temur, but it's just because it has blue, red, and green abilities sort of strapped to it independently. Temur's always been hard for them to figure out, and my limited knowledge of what Temur has historically been in constructed is it's usually a combo deck of some kind that wants to generate a bunch of mana.
Or a ramp deck.
Or like a ramp, like a combo ramp, like a ramp combo deck. There is one other Temur card that I want to talk about real quick. It's called Dragonback Assault. It is 3 green, blue, red. And when this enchantment enters, it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. And then landfall, whenever a land you control enters, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. This card actually does feel pretty Temur to me, right? The wrath elements of it is the red part, and then the dragon creation is kind of like green-red. There's nothing about it that feels especially blue, but, again, that's kind of difficult to accomplish. This card, I think, is actually really powerful. Especially, Jesus Christ, if you're playing a cube where you're like doubling up on each fetch, I think it kind of gets out of control really fast to the point that it might be obnoxious. But this has some really powerful inevitability vibes, and it's actually kind of a neat design for like one of these inevitability, like lands enter and giant creatures happen, in that like when it comes down, it also kind of sweeps up any aggression that you might be under. And in the event that it's sweeping up aggression, pressure that you're under, you kind of don't care if you're killing the dorks that you use to ramp this out faster, because if it sits on the battlefield for a couple of turns, it's going to be really hard to lose. For my money, this is probably one of the more Temur cards that's ever Temured in terms of its design. I think it's very strong. I think you might get some groans at your table for the same reason that you used to get groans about Field of the Dead, but this at least costs mana, and it can be removed with enchantment removal, but yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, plus 3 damage on 6 mana, like, isn't gonna... Like, I feel like this card's fairly balanced, right? It's not destroy all creatures, it's 3 damage, so, like, the 4/4s and stuff Sphalen would stick around, as an example. Preacher of the Schism would stick around. There's a lot of 4 toughness things that stick around through it, so it's not like a full sweeper that then just takes over the game. It will leave some things behind, probably.
My issue with it, I think, a little bit from a draft perspective is, and Loot has the same problem, really, like any Temur card sort of has the same problem, but like the ABZAN card we were talking about that interacts with sacrificing tokens and like yada yada yada, like that is not going to just get shoved into a deck that can make all 3 colors. Dragonback Assault does not say play Temur. Dragonback Assault says play as many colors as you can and steal and just hoover up as many fetches as you can get. Like, this is fully like a 5-color card from my perspective, but it is very powerful, and it does have a very Temur vibe to me. Teld, what do you think about this card?
It interacts favorably with fetchlands, so I hate it. I don't know. I think it's fine. Like, 6 mana, deal 3 to everything is a good way to clean up small creatures, but I think the problem I would say is that the Temur decks are probably already favored into small ball creature decks on average.
That's true.
Not dealing with like other green decks. I mean, I guess the upside is that if you're not under a huge amount of pressure, which hopefully you won't be if you're playing this card, and you have like a stabilized board, it's going to win most matchups, but it kind of has that virtue of persistence thing going on where it's kind of unbeatable in a longer game.
Take Witch Enchanter. Take Witch Enchanter in your draft, people.
I tend not to like cards like this, but I can't deny that it's good and sort of interesting. It's more interesting than some deeper cards for sure.
I think the problem if we were to play it, and I don't know, we could talk about whether or not it's something we would ever want to test online, but I think the problem is going to be that like green ramping into stuff you can't attack through is already kind of a problem if you're a small ball deck. And if you're a small ball deck that like isn't expecting your board to get cleaned up into your opponent's like 4-color creature deck and then like does, and then they just untap the next turn, play a land and make a 4/4, you're kind of just cooked. Yeah, but I do think that this is powerful, and I do think it is a very, as far as team, I guess most teamer cards are just like, oh man, I guess it's going to be real big, and it might have some card advantage on it. This is a very unique design, so could be cool for your cube.
Let's talk some Sultai cards real quick. It's actually funny. Are the only 2 Sultai cards? So I forgot to mention this up front, and I forgot it when I was adding cards to the list that I was interested in talking about. But the Commander face cards are also coming to Arena, so those are options that we have to discuss here. And the Kotis and the Taval here on the list are both from the Commander product rather than the mainline cards. Who wanted to mention Kotis here?
So Kotis Sibsig Champion is a black, a green, and a blue for a 3/3. No keywords. Legendary creature zombie warrior. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard by exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard in addition to paying its other costs. Whenever one or more creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Kotis. So it's a 3-mana 3/3 across 3 colors, which is kind of a rough deal. It gives the mechanic was called Forage, right? Like
Escape, Forage, one of those 2.
Yeah, so it basically gives all of your creatures Escape 3. Realistically, you're only going to get to do that a couple times, because, like, remember also in blue-green, you've got access to, like, other stuff that can eat your graveyard. We did get rid of Uro, finally. But I think that this card is really going to be maximized if you have creatures that can, other effects in your graveyard, or in your deck that can just get creatures out of your graveyard, even without exploiting the ability. And ways to fill your graveyard. I would be a lot more excited about this card if it had, like, maybe they had slapped, like, some ETB mill on it or something. Yeah. But as it stands, I'm not sure that this is going to be popular for 3 different colors of mana.
Yeah, it can get big with, like, your Bloodghasts and your Cult Conscripts and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's my thing, is, like, I was thinking about that, like, the black recursive creatures can push this, but the black recursive creatures, such as they still exist in our cube and haven't been edged out by other more powerful cards, they tend to be cards I'd rather be putting in my, like, Mardu style decks.
Yeah, aggressive, non-grindy, 3-color
right.
Nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I would like this card better if and obviously this isn't the card we got, but if it said whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, put a +1 counter on it. So you would still get 2, right? When you did it, you would exile the 3 and get a counter, and then you'd get the creature to enter, and that would leave and get a counter. But then it'd have a little more play with, like, things that picked up cards out of the yard. I think it'd just be a little more playable. I don't hate this card, but we did play the Bloomburrow Squirrel that foraged to reanimate stuff, and people weren't really on that one. This one requires a lot more colors of mana. It doesn't have to tap, so that's nice, and it does become huge, so it's got some upside there for sure. But yeah, not being self-enabling, I think this needed, like, ATB mill 3 or, beginning of your upkeep mill 2 cards or something like that.
Give me Trample.
Ooh, yeah, Trample.
It's probably worth noting, too, that, like, it's not once per turn, so you can set up some sort of weird loop with, like, your Bloodstained Champion and, like, sack it, bring it back, sack it, bring it back. Mm-hmm. Like, you can get, like, 6 +1/+1 counters on this in a turn or whatever. It goes infinite with Gravecrawler and a sack outlet, that sort of thing. So
mm-hmm.
Sure.
The other Sultai card, I wasn't originally going to mention this, but Chris, you said just a couple moments ago that, like, you wish they'd given us a Sultai card that played in, like, the ramp space and stuff, and I wanted to get your take on this one. This is actually the other Commander card that goes with the Commander Kotis, but Taval, the Balanced Scale, is 1 and Sultai mana, so 4 mana total for a 4/4 Legendary Spirit Dragon with flying. When it attacks, you mill 3 cards and then return a land from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and whenever 1 or more cards leaves your graveyard, you make a 2/2 zombie druid creature token. And I wondered how this hits the bar of, like, that Sultai kind of angle you're looking for.
This exactly fits the Sultai angle I was looking for, and I really like that card. Teld did point out that this is a 4-drop that dies to Doomblade and is 3 colors, and that is true, but I I do think that there is enough power here to consider trying it. So I'll let Teld speak to it. This is exactly the type of card I was looking for. It feels like maybe it could have used Ward.
Ward or something that can... I mean, I guess on like 5 mana, if you had a Scavenging Ooze in play, like something that could exile something immediately, so you can guarantee at least get the first 2 too.
Like if it triggered when it enters or attacks.
Yeah, if it did it on enter or attack, I think it would just be really, really powerful. To me, like 4 is like the upper limit of what I think is acceptable to pay for a Baneslayer, like a pure Baneslayer. It's like the very upper end of it. And then the question for me is this powerful enough under the mana constrictions that it has to meet that? This is a 4 mana Baneslayer that like I'm willing to take a 2 mana blowout risk on. And for me, I think the answer is yes, but it might just be more being enamored with this actually feeling like a Sultai card to me that's playable than anything else.
Would our players take that risk is the question.
Would I take this risk on a flyer in Peasant Cube? Yes. I mean, not just on power. I know obviously it's more powerful than your average Peasant card. But what I mean is the synergies are there. I'm not actually convinced that this card has the... Like, there are some synergies, but I'm not convinced they're all there. I do want to say this card, I'm simultaneously excited about this card because it's a really cool commander, and also mad because I was messing around with various Tormod partner brews trying to figure out how to get Sultai mana with a functional pair of partners. And then this card just does literally all of that on top of being a value card. So there is that, but I don't know. I think 4 mana in 3 different colors to get a card with no ward, no ETB is just a death knell in Modern Magic.
I mean, I don't agree with that. Like, I think people are too harsh on things that like at this cost that don't give you like if the upside is there when you untap with it, like sometimes it's just worth it. I don't know, but like I hear what you're saying is like. Yeah. You should probably expect this to live, like for every time it dies right away, you should expect it to live right away.
Yeah, if it lives, it's pretty decent, right? We probably get back a land and then a zombie, and then maybe we're able to combo with it.
If it lives and you make a 2/2 and ramp every single turn while also filling up your graveyard for other stuff with the potential of like triggering it multiple times through other means to make more zombies, like obviously it's really good if it lives. It's just will it live? I don't know. It's got a 3-color tax on it. Will that drive away our drafters? Probably. Like
I think it still has the same problem that the last card did too, of like the easiest way to trigger this Graveyard Matters line of text is at odds with what you're actually going to be doing with this card, outside of something like Honest Roasting, which is like obviously super powerful, but the black Bloodghasty type dork cards just don't really play well in this space, and they are the easiest way to trigger this card.
I just kind of want to consider trying it for us just because this is like the Sultai design I've been looking for.
I'm on board to try it out. I think it's a very cool card.
I would like to try it.
I could see a world where our drafters are just like, I'm not touching that, like it's 3 colors or whatever, but
yeah, that's how I'm going to be drafting. I think. I suspect when I see this card in a pack, I'm going to be like, well, not touching that with a 10-foot.
I would 100% first pick this if I was drafting and it was in a cube right now. Whether I would tell other people to do that or not, I don't know, but I would do it. Let's go ahead and talk Mardu cards. We've got 4 Mardu cards to talk about here, starting off with the chicken. The Mardu Siege Breaker here. It's 1 red, white, black for a 4/4 human warrior with Death Touch and Haste. When it enters, exile up to 1 other target creature you control until this creature leaves the battlefield. And whenever it attacks, for each opponent, you make a tapped token that's a copy of the exiled creature that's attacking that opponent, and you sacrifice those tokens at the beginning of the end step. So think this mobilizes, but it mobilizes whatever you ate when it entered the battlefield. I think, Adeline, but instead of making 1/1 tokens, you just make a copy of something that you like consumed, and then obviously you get your creature back when this leaves the battlefield. So I don't know what the dream card to exile underneath this is, but basically anything with an ETB should be really strong, right? Like, let's just use a Spirited Companion, like the baseline, like maybe simplest creature we could eat here. You play this, you eat your own Spirited Companion, you attack. It's a 4/4 with Death Touch and Haste, so like you're probably getting that first attack in. You make a Spirited Companion that's also attacking your opponent. You draw the card, and then if they ever deal with this, you just get your Spirited Companion back too, so you get the ETB off of it again. So as long as you get that first attack in, even if this trades or whatever, there's some massive upside to this card.
Yeah, can I interest you in a Draconautics engineer?
And just exhaust it every turn, like exhaust a new one every turn.
Yeah, just make a new
Oh
4/4
my,
every turn.
oh
It
my
was really
God.
cool of him to preview the Final Fantasy set in Tarkir here.
It does look a little chocobo-y. It's worth noting you don't get attack triggers off of the copy of the creature that you're
Yeah.
making, but so like there's no mobilized trickery or anything like that there, but
Or at the beginning of combat on your turn. Yeah, I was super, super excited about this when Teld first pointed it out. I still think it is decent, but to your point, it wants to be paired with creatures that do shit when they enter, not creatures that care about attacking because of the delay on that. So, like, I mean, if you played like Blade Splicer, and then you just started like Blade Splicing every turn, that'd be nuts. Team bring back Blade Splicer, I guess. I think it's also kind of nice in like sacrificey decks if you just like create a copy of like your LS every turn or something. Like I think that this is the card that on face value it seems the most straightforward of a lot of them, like just attack and profit. But I don't know. I honestly do not know what to expect from this card. I honestly don't.
This strikes me as a really cool card if we ever get around to doing that synergy cube to include as like some sort of weird wonky payoff. I actually looking through our list, I don't know how many because most of our best cards that you could conceivably make copies of are cards with attack triggers or beginning of combat triggers. So I'm not entirely convinced that we're gonna be doing anything super rad and cool with this. Although the dream is definitely there.
Hellspur Posse Boss, baby.
what if this is just 4 mana 4/4 big rabble master? Like you're
Yeah.
not even getting you like even if you don't get like a sweet ETB or something, and you just tuck away a split skin doll that's like not drawing cards or whatever, like you're just getting an extra 2/1 on top of the 4. Like the death touch really kind of does it for me here because it means like
Yeah.
it's going to be able to attack no matter what the board state is. I mean, obviously you want some sort of extra value off the thing that's coming in, but even if it's just extra damage on top of like Ulvenwald Oddity, basically. And then there is the upside of like, oh, I tucked away freaking Elite Spellbinder and I'm hitting you for, I'm looking at your hand every turn or whatever.
Spellbinder is a good hit. Oh, you know what? Actually, might be the best hit too, even without the combat trigger. Not best. One of the better ones is Steel Seraph because you can prototype it in, and then
Sure,
you
yeah.
get the 5/4 when it attacks, and then when they kill this thing, you get the 5/4 again.
Yeah, though again, well, that is actually pretty good. You're missing the attack trigger on the Steel Seraph, like we said, but you're getting a 5/4 attacker every turn. Like, ooh, ABZAN, or Selfless Spirit, and you just indestructible every turn.
Yeah, Selfless Spirit's kind of the nuts. In black, like just making Marionette Masters over and over again is like kind of nice. I think that this is interesting enough, and there's like enough like, well, what if you pull? Oh man, just making a hostile investigator every single turn.
Ooh,
Yeah, weirdly, it kind of like, well, not weirdly, but like it synergizes better, like the larger thing that you're copy. Ooh, man, glory bringer.
Yeah, but
every
you're
turn.
also incentivized to be playing an aggressive deck, and so you're probably thinking about what 3 mana or less things I can copy with it because you want to be playing it on curve. I think there's some definite tension with this card. It's really neat. It's a very cool card, like one of the more thought like cards that gets me kind of like, oh, what's the coolest thing we could do? Like we play it with Elspeth, right? We curve into Elspeth, and then we get double the tokens on the next turn.
Sanguine Evangelist is actually really nuts with this too.
gee, yeah. There's a lot of nuts things you can come up, and this is my one for the episode. I'm only doing it once, but like in Commander, it's for each opponent. You make one copy for each opponent.
This is Myriad
insane.
or whatever.
Yeah, Myriad, like it's literally Adeline, but the tokens are just Sun Titans or something.
Oh,
like.
and in that format, you're going to be able to do some wilder things. So you're going to be able to do some really silly things with it. I think it's going to be great. Yeah.
I think as a Mardu card, this has got to be one of the more interesting Mardu cards printed in terms of how difficult it is to sort of grok and like the things that you could do with it. I mean, obviously there's also like the creatures in Magic's history that people have traditionally put into like Alesha decks where they have like they do something on contact that's super devastating that you basically have to block every time. But my inclination would be this. I think if we're going to test a Mardu card from the set, like I'd like to start out testing this one because it is the most interesting. But I have a feeling that we might eventually swap it for one of the next two that we're going to talk about.
I do want to mention one of the next two is one that I think might be better.
Let's get into the Zergos then. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
Zergos.
here's the infinite Zergos. First up, there's Zergo's Thunder's Decree, which is Mardu mana, so red, white, black for a 2/4 with Mobilize 2, and during your in-step warrior tokens you control have this token can't be sacrificed. This card's like whatever. It needs to be played on curve. It's not particularly good stats, doesn't have any combat keywords, and it's in an aggressive color. Yeah, this card is fine-ish, but I think the tension of needing to both play this on curve in an aggressive wedge on 3 mana, like exactly turn 3, because if you don't play this on exactly turn 3, it's not doing anything, and even then it's basically just the 2 mana card way back at the beginning of the review episode that we looked at with +1/+1 on stats.
Well, just to kind of like give it a little bit of an edge there, if you play a mobilized creature and then follow up with Zergo, you will keep the mobilized creatures from the 2-drop that like already could attack. Which,
that's like the joke.
I don't know that we're anticipating curve and mobilized creatures in Cube or something like that, but
no,
just a cute little interaction there.
I'm ready to move on to the better, cooler Zergo if you are.
Yeah.
Commander Zergo.
Commander
Zergo. So this is Zergo Storm Render, and it is also Mardu mana for a 3/3 Zergo. And it has Mobilize 1, and whenever a creature token you control leaves the battlefield, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, each opponent loses 1 life. And this is, in my opinion, this is not only stronger, like obviously stronger, but also much more in line with what Mardu is looking to do, which is kill you dead, and it helps you generate some value in longer games. It self-enables if you need it to.
Yep.
It's got a better attacking stat line, and if we don't play it on curve, it's still probably okay if we're able to like get a Jadar rolling or something.
Well, and yeah, it's whenever a creature token you control, right? It's not limited to once per turn, so if you have several tokens on board that are not attacking because they're getting stonewalled by your opponent's board, you just drop this
just
and
converts.
swing.
Wow.
Yeah,
you
just drop this and swing.
This converts hard. Oh wow, I didn't even think about the. I just like mentally like heuristic to once per turn draw a card.
Nope. This doesn't have to attack to do. If you have good token generation in your deck, this does not have to attack to do like anything.
Is this card correct?
I mean, it's limited to only tokens, so it's a little narrow, but like there's a lot of token generation in these colors. So
yeah, I mean it's so. If you're playing like Legion Warboss or Adeline or anything else that spams tokens when you attack, if any of them get blocked and eaten, you draw a card. It's just like a Blood Artist type effect if you are sacrificing tokens. I think this might be our guy right here, honestly. Like the Siegebreaker is a very cool card, but in terms of being able to easily grok, like, in a deck with good token generation, which Mardu has become increasingly good at. Like, I mean, you could even, I know this is sort of like an outside thing, but like you could like swing with your 0/1 goat off of Woe Strider and then sack it, and that turns it into a scry draw.
Yeah. We also mentioned 5 token producing cards earlier that are almost guaranteed to get into the queue.
Yeah, so like, okay, yeah, so perfect example, like, like this is assuming that everything comes out on curve and the right color, yada yada yada. If your mana is good, you could play like the 2-drop that makes 2 bodies when it attacks, and then if you're on the play and you can swing with that, you just like slam this, swing with that, and then if both tokens, one of them gets blocked, like the other one gets sacrificed, like you just draw cards. And then the Woe Strider joke aside, like you can also just like, if you're like in combat and you need to find like a Doomblade or something pre-blocks to make things work, you can swing out with like your whole board, and then you can like sacrifice the tokens that are probably not going to get through anyway with an instant speed sacrifice effect, like before damage is actually dealt, to like dig for your Doomblade or whatever to get rid of the blocker that's going to prevent you from killing them that turn, or like whatever it happens to be. So I actually, the more I read this card, the more I'm like, I actually think that this is just kind of an amazing Mardu tokens card.
Yeah, I know you had mentioned too about possibly bringing back Legion Warboss as just like a second version of that effect for aggressive decks, and this seems like this card to me strikes me as the kind of card that is just, there's not a lot of, I mean, you do have to do some deck building, but it doesn't require nearly as much theory crafting as and setup as the 4 mana card.
Yep.
Yeah, it just kind of does the thing while enabling. Like even if you just attack with this and you just make it a token, and you're in Mardu, you've got mana, you've got combat tricks, you've got removal spells. Yeah, like I think early in the game, this card's going to be really annoying, and late in the game, this card's going to be really annoying. So this strikes me as just very good. Like, obviously, some deck building aside, I think this is very good.
Yeah, I think this is our guy. Like, if your Mardu Spectrum decks are doing, like, if you're doing black-white sacrifice, black-red sacrifice, and, like, Boros, like, go wide, and those are very common ways to build those colors in Magic, I think that's just, like, fits. Like, this strikes me as the type of thing, you don't even need to be Mardu. Like, because I don't think you absolutely need to play this card on turn 3, because it can come down later when you have token generation going already, and all of a sudden it's, like, ready to do powerful things very quickly. If I'm playing, like, a black-white deck and I get my hands on, if I just manage to snipe, like, 3 sources of red mana to fit into my non-basic base, I might include this anyway, especially if I had a fetch to go find it whenever I needed it. This just strikes me as an excellent Mardu card.
Yeah, also, name's cool, art's cool.
Yep.
Sorry, other mainline set Zergo, the commander card, wins this fight. The only Jeskai card we someone put here, which talk about Mole Slayers. Shiko, Paragon of the Way, is 2 blue, red, white for a 4/5 Spirit Dragon legendary, flying in Vigilance, and when it enters, exile target non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard, copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Non-land card. This can flashback a freaking creature from your graveyard.
Yes, it can.
5 mana for probably 7 to 8 mana's worth of cards on the battlefield, and one of them's a giant flyer, and the other one's probably some sort of utility card you got out of your graveyard. Or if it is just a removal spell, like you're talking about a giant like Necrotal on top of a big flying vigilance creature. So I mean, this is definitionally a Mole Slayer, right? Mole Drifter plus Bane Slayer at the same time.
Yeah, this is a cool card. Teld and I were talking about it, and if you think of Quintorius as mostly a Jeskai card, then you could ask yourself the question, do I have room for that and this like other 5 mana actually Jeskai card? But this design is really cool. One of the things that I like about it is, you know, sagas that cost less than 3, just recur your saga, and sagas tend to get very good value if they're good cards, and they send themselves to the graveyard automatically. Obviously, red, blue, and white all have, like, excellent 3-drop creatures that if they come back onto the battlefield, in addition to a 4/5 flying vigilance, your opponent's going to be like, Christ, okay. This card strikes me as good. The question is, like, is it a card that you make room for it in your cube list?
It strikes me as like very, very good. It also kind of goes off with if you're playing things like the Blink package with Soul Herder or Flicker Wisp, it can get those cards out of the graveyard, and then they can blink this to just get another card from your graveyard. So there's probably like some combo chains there too with ghostly flickers and stuff. It does exile the card and make a copy of it, so you can't like go infinite with the same card over and over again. But
right,
I mean, we talked about the Yathan Watcher, the ABZAN card that mills you and then puts a 3-drop back into play. This is just that card, but on a giant dragon and Jeskai instead of ABZAN.
Yeah, no, so it's a cool card.
It's safe to say you're just never missing on this, right? Like, we can just say if you've survived to turn 5, you're going to hit.
I feel like if you have reached turn 5 and you don't have anything in your yard yet, it means you're probably kicking ass.
Yeah, this is the Beza thing, right? Of like, if you've reached that stage of the game and it does nothing, it's just a big body, then like you're already super far ahead. But yeah, I think being 3-color taxed on what's ultimately kind of a boring card in this particular case, because it just is a value card that doesn't have any particular synergies, I'm not really into it. Quintorius is like a de facto Jeskai card, but the fact that it isn't literally Jeskai mana means you can do it in other shells sometimes. We've seen some Boros mid-range decks play around with it, whereas this is a little more restrictive, and again, the ceiling isn't quite there, and there's also there's no floor. Like, sometimes, Quintorius, if you're being really greedy with it, you just jam it into your opponent's open mana and they Doomblade it and you cry. Whereas this just is like, all right, whatever, you got the Doomblade, I still generate my 3 mana value worth of stuff. It's a good card, though. Really good card.
The other thing that gives me a little bit of pause about this card is, like, it feels very Jeskai in what it does, but it doesn't feel like it's telling you that your Jeskai deck is supposed to be doing something specific. I think this is just going to end up in any multicolor pile that can cast it, basically.
Yeah, there was also the other one was the one you'd originally looked at. There was the
Jeskai
3/3. Yeah, Jeskai 3/3 or first strike, and when it enters, you copy the next spell you cast this turn and choose new copies. And that card is also probably very powerful, but it is a little more restrictive if you're interested in that. Like if that's something you're looking for, it's not just as much guaranteed value, and it's not quite as massive of a body.
I really like that card. This was obviously we're talking about a different card, but I think I would have liked it better if it was like a 2/2 first strike with the same text that also had prowess, but that would probably be nuts. Flamehold Grappler is the card that I wish had been the card that screamed to me like, oh, we have to play this Jeskai card. We can talk about Flamehold Grappler a little bit more offline if we want to. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time reviewing it because it's pretty straightforward.
I think that covers 3 color cards. There's only 1 2-color card in here, and it's a Simic card, and it says instant on it, so I can only imagine like who would add that to the list. But just FYI, Chris, me and Danelius really like this card in the Peasant Cube review, and Teld panned it like super hard and thought it was awful and not worth a cube slot. So
okay.
We'll get your opinion on this one.
I don't understand that second take.
That's okay. I don't understand the first take.
Auroral Procession, yeah, it's regrowth at instant speed for 1 and a green, or a green and a blue, and it's instant, and it's any card. So I think this card is worth discussing for Simic simply because like our Simic decks, and if you're playing some of the more tempo oriented cards that are printed in Simic, you probably realize like a lot of them are pretty excellent. Being able to hold up like counter magic or flash creatures or Tyvar stand or whatever, and then if you don't force me to do anything, I can just spend 2 mana to an instant speed, like draw the best thing in my graveyard for the situation. That seems like a good card to me.
So alternatively, you could have just cast literally any other card with flash. You could have not wasted a cube slot or a deck slot on spending 2 mana to draw a card and just cycle and spin your wheels. But most importantly is the cube equity thing. That's the biggest thing, is like, I'm going to be physically, or just like, I'm going to actually be annoyed at someone if I see this card in a cube. And the reason is, it is the most boring possible card you could have ever put a gold slot for. This is on top of having to set up our 2 mana cycle. Like, I'm not saying it's not good. It'll probably be good. But there's something wrong with, there's something wrong with this one. I can't, there's just something that viscerally makes me angry.
You don't, this is like a card where you're like, if we have to like agonize over what to cut to fit it in, you're just going to want to throw up your hands and be like, let's just not play it.
Yeah, it's got Lightning Helix vibes in that sense, and I can buy that part of the argument, but I think the flexibility, I've come up on this card even since the Peasant review. I think the flexibility of this card past like turn 4 or 5 is just really strong, and like it's like, oh, I don't get to cast this on turn 2, and it's like, yeah, you don't get to cast like Back for Seconds on turn 3 in the Peasant Cube either. So like,
yeah, but Back for Seconds is super cool and also generates value.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll give you a point for cool factor here. It doesn't like scream like whatever. It's got that Elden Ring like spirit elk boss on it for some reason off in the distance. Like the art's fine. Like the card does not ooze like, wow, look at this Simic card or something. But like, we could easily be playing something like Growth. I think this is a fine role player card in the same vein as like a Growth Spiral or something like that.
I think it's a lot better than Growth Spiral personally. Well, it's different.
Yeah, it's a different card. It's a different card. So it's hard to make that comparison. But as far as like the cube equity argument goes, like generic bread butter effect that like isn't screaming any sort of strategy. I get what you're saying there, Teld. I think you're too down on the card. I think this has a lot of flexibility in the late game. Like, hold this up with your repulsive mutation and stuff like that. I think there's a lot you can do with this card being an instant. I think that recontextualizes like a regrowth quite a bit.
Yeah, sure, but isn't there also the question of what card did you cut from your deck? What card are you not playing? Like, I know it's not. I know opening hand isn't everything, but every time you open this card, instead of like whatever 2-drop you would have ran instead, or whatever cheap card you would have ran instead, because this isn't a value card. This is a 1-for-1. So we're like, it's covering in the same space, right? Like you're not generating any actual value, and you're spending mana. You're literally spending mana to spin your wheels. So like, we could have, if you open this instead of having an actual like 2-drop or a flash creature or whatever, I don't know. I think it's gonna feel really bad. I think it's a fine card. I'm just really down on it for mostly cube equity reasons, but also I just think it's really boring, and I don't want to spend 2 mana to like cycle a card for unless I have to.
Reducing it to just cycling is not necessarily fair though, because like, that's like saying casting Unearth is just cycling because it's just replacing itself with a different card. Like that's clearly not. Although bad example, because Unearth actually has cycling, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like. Well, sure, yeah. Like if you want to like be a little more charitable to it, it's Demonic Tutor you have to set up, but like the you have to set up part.
Damn,
is
that
the
sounds
problem.
that sounds like a really good card as an instant.
I like this card again because of the shape that our Simic Tempo decks have taken. Like each turn that I have 2 mana, I can either leave up a way to like interact with whatever you're going to cast, and then that's going to, generally speaking, incentivize you to either not cast the thing that you don't want me to counter into my mana, or cast something that is less counter worthy in the hope that I won't counter it. And then if I have this in my hand, I'll be like, okay, well I can live with that. And instead what I'm going to do is like go get my great 4-drop that you killed back, or go get my Time Warp back, or whatever. I like this card quite a bit. I can see the argument for cube equity insofar as it not being particularly interesting, but like also just anytime that you draw this in like a Simic tempo deck, if you have a like if your opponent has like a counter spell or like a card that they play and you're like, oh, I have to counter that, you can go fish up your counter spell and counterspell it. Or if they counter something where like I don't need to deal with that, I go get this instead. Or what I think that if you're trying to play instant speed in a blue-green deck, instant speed regrowth seems pretty fucking sick to me. Obviously, this card gets better the more cards in your cube and in your deck that can put more cards in the graveyard, because they make more of your,
Sure.
Make your graveyard kind of an extension of your library.
Yeah, this card does get better when you put actual good cards in your deck.
Yeah,
I just like that Teld's getting punked on in this one, and it's not me for once.
Okay, let's move on.
All right, three cards left here. One of them's big splashy colorless card here, but I think there's merit. Ugin, Eye of the Storms, is 7 generic mana for a 7 loyalty Ugin Planeswalker. The passive says, when you cast this spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more color, so it doesn't hit lands, it doesn't hit colorless artifacts. And then also, whenever you cast a colorless spell while Ugin's on the battlefield, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more color. So you get the cast trigger, kill something right away, and then if you follow up with additional colorless spells, which don't read into that too much, you get to exile additional stuff. That does make it a huge player in like Modern and stuff. This is basically replaced Karn Liberated at this point. And then it has loyalty abilities because it's a Planeswalker. So +2, you gain 3 life and draw a card. The 0 just says add 3 colorless mana, nothing else to that. And then -11, first time actually reading the -11. Search your library for any number of colorless non-land cards, exile them, then shuffle until end of turn. You may cast them without paying it. Okay, well, whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So my take on adding this is like, this reads like big splashy constructed card, but I actually think like if you ignore all the colorless text, like follow up with a bunch of colorless cards, I still think 7 mana for a 7 mana walker that kills your opponent's best card.
Exiles it, yeah.
Yeah, exiles their best card and then just draws a card and gains life every single turn. Going up to 9 loyalty right away is just good enough, and bridges a little bit of a gap as like maybe a tier 2 control finisher, because it doesn't play at instant speed or anything like that. It's vulnerable to certain types of removal, but also a ramp target for ramp decks. I think this kind of has 2 different homes while being like kind of a huge removal spell / value engine in the late game. And then of course, like, yeah, if you can follow it up with Mishra's Bauble or Eldrazi Processor or some colorless card and exile something else, it's obviously like broken at that point. But I like this as giant removal spell that leaves behind a value engine for specifically like hard control decks and hard ramp decks, and probably like nowhere else in between. I think this is a powerful colorless card.
Mishra's Bauble truly is my core Skyfisher of the mainline queue.
Bauble stocks are just like at an all-time high.
It's the only stocks that are at an all-time high.
Oh man, too real.
Yeah, you can basically, I mean, outside of Bauble, you can mostly ignore the rest of the text on this card as far as the colorless stuff, because we play a grand total of what, 7? There's
you might cast a Smuggler's Copter once, and then Smuggler's Copter blows up your opponent's best permanent. It's fucking insane.
Yeah, I was gonna say Bankbuster, but yeah, that and like the Repurposer are kind of the only colorless cards we ran. Obviously, if you have a bunch of those floating around, something like in the we talked about Vintage Cube with like Moxen and stuff, and obviously you probably have already played those to ramp into this. But if you ever get to like Paradoxical Outcome, pick them up, and then like, all right, never mind. Anyways, Magic Christmas Land aside, this is just like solid, right? You kill your opponent's best card, and you plus to start gaining life and make it a giant planeswalker they have to deal with after you killed their best card and put you up cards. My problem with this card is I sort of feel like it's a not great control finisher because it doesn't actually finish. So you're digging towards other threats, which leads me to the conclusion that this is another, much like the Aether Spark, sneaky green card. in that it doesn't have any green symbols on the card, but the only decks that are ever going to actually play this card are green decks.
I think that's probably true for us. I mean, the add 3 colorless mana can be really, really powerful if you are playing a deck that is capable of producing like shitloads of card advantage, ideally off of expensive card advantage spells that this can pay for. You know, I mean, I think the true power here for like most cubes is going to be this comes down, this exiles your opponent's best thing, like exiles it, gets rid of it completely, and then immediately goes up to 9 loyalty while gaining your opponent, like gaining you 3 life and drawing a card. 9 loyalty is so big that most decks, especially after their best thing has been eliminated, are not going to be able to attack this down. And they might be incentivized to not even try, because if they try to attack this down while you're plussing it and gaining life, like, you're never going to die. It's a powerful card. It's just like Teld said, I don't see control decks really looking to this to finish with. And I think that when your green opponent ramps into this on turn 5, gets rid of your best thing, and then just gains like infinite life and keeps drawing cards, you're going to be, as an aggressive player, you're going to be really pissed. So I don't know if I like this for us, but I do think that there's a lot of power here. And I think if you're going for like a big splashy cube where maybe your average effect costs like, instead of like 1.75, your average effect costs like 3, then you're probably really cooking with gas.
Yeah, I could see it falling into basically green or bust.
Would you say the other colors are green with envy?
I wouldn't say that, but you're certainly more than welcome to say that. Okay, there's two utility lands on here that were added.
The first one is ABZAN Encampment. This is a cycle of weird lands where they're monocolored in their mana production, but they care about other colors of basic land being present, so it's kind of hard to evaluate them as like monocolored because they're sort of not. ABZAN Encampment is a land. It enters tapped unless you control... Well, I mean, I guess like you could play a tap land that would do this, even if you're not in these colors, right? But it enters tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain. It taps to add white, and then it costs 2 and a white and tapping this, so effectively 4 mana. Whenever you attack this turn, create 2 1/1 red warrior creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So it's basically like a mobilize kind of encampment. You get the joke. I think that if you are in red-white or red-black, I think I'm happy to run this land.
I mean, it's basically just a mana land, right? Like, it just turns into 2 1/1s every turn, but it doesn't risk itself in combat.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I look at it. And then, you know, with the anthemic stuff from white, with the drain stuff from black-red, with Zergo, whatever, this strikes me as a card worth considering for sure. It's just a question of, like, when you add it, this is not like a white utility land. I think you're just going to slap into any deck. Like, you obviously want the prospect of it coming in untapped.
Yeah. You think this is better than Cave of the Frost Dragon?
Might be.
It's a lot cheaper to activate.
I think it's a very different card, but I don't think Cave of the Frost Dragon is very popular.
I think it's better, and the reason it's better is that the decks that want this style of effect don't actually care about Cave of the Frost Dragon being a 3-power creature. They just want more bodies in play, and this lets you get those bodies into play. Right? They're playing Enduring Innocence, and they're playing like the cheap anthems, War Leader's Call, you know, the all those effects, the attack triggers and stuff. I think this card's pretty good. Like I mean, obviously if you draw it like turn like your 3rd, 4th, 5th land, it could be a little awkward. But if it's your first land in like a white aggressive deck, you just play a tap land. And
you know what though, you can't just. So unlike like Cave of the Frost Giant, you can't just activate this, and you have to have something on board that can already attack. For
so it doesn't let you attack. Yeah,
no.
Wrath, sure. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Like post sweeper, it can't just get in like Den of the Bugbear or something like that.
Yeah, you can't just use this as a like, whoops, I have like pressure I can put on you from my I'm like a control deck. I don't know why I was
thinking this was actually a creature land.
No, this is definitely like a card that wants to be in a Mardu deck, right? Like this card is gonna. Well, yeah. No, I mean, the tap notwithstanding, right? I mean, I would probably consider putting this in my Selesnya deck as like a tap land if I'm doing a go wide thing, because I think I'm willing to potentially make that sacrifice of like having a tap land into my deck, because like when you do activate this, it's like way better than flipped Legion's Landing, pretty much, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so I think even if I was off color, I would consider putting this in my Selesnya deck that cares about spamming out bodies. Like I said, it's very different from Cave, because Cave theoretically is like, it can be like a Celestial Colonnade. You know, like I can slowly win with it out of my control deck on the ground. But what I've been at least seeing for a while, and I haven't been playing nearly as much recently, but like a lot of the really expensive to activate man lands just don't seem to be getting activated very often. And I think the other thing that I like about this card is if I'm playing like an aggressively oriented white deck that's enjoying going wide, if you're not responding to what I'm doing on board and you're a control deck, like I can just keep activating this instead of committing to the board and make you do something about it, right?
So the reverse of that is that, like, if you activate this and then they kill your one attacker in response, you just like down the mana for the turn. So there's some rough situations with it. I definitely see the upside here. There's clear downsides and there's clear upsides. So I'm like, is that we should probably just like test this over Cave of the Frost Giant or Dragon or whatever, just to kind of like see like where it lands. But yeah, that Mardu Spectrum, like creature-ish land, I kind of see a lot of merit to having something like this.
Yeah, because the way I've seen the creature lands, because we're only on the Jeskai ones right now, and so it's like Den's still really good, just does exactly what that color wants to be doing, and Hall is still fine because sometimes you just need a ham sandwich to hit your opponent twice in the face.
I think Hall of the Storm Giant's sneaky, like excellent. I think people don't give that card enough credit.
I find it difficult to take during a draft because there's so frequently either a fixing land or just an important piece. But like if you have it in your deck, you're usually pretty happy with it. And like you said, sometimes like you just sneaky get to kill your opponent out of your mana base, which is great. But I think the Frost Dragon card, just the amount of mana you spend to the amount of damage you get, I just feel like if I play it in my deck and I've got it for like 3 full rounds, I'm probably activating it once or twice the whole night.
Cave of the Frost Giant says you skip your turn, deal 3 damage to your opponent. Like that's what the effect of the card is, assuming you can even get an attack and it doesn't die. This is this has a little bit more longevity, especially with sacrifice effects and stuff like that, as long as you're an attacking deck. So it doesn't like go in a control deck or anything like that. So it's very interesting. It has like different homes, different feel to it.
I think this offers more. I mean, the counter argument could maybe be that like you can block with Cave of the Frost Dragon, but if you're in a situation where you're having to hold up mana to block with Cave of the Frost Dragon, your shit's probably getting pushed in anyway. I've also been in situations where my opponent has decided they're going to sink all their mana into Cave of the Frost Dragon, then it pops up and then I Doomblade it and they're very sad. And that can happen to Hall, but Hall has wards, so you have to kind of plan on being able to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to compare these cards, like, straight up because they're not the same card, but from a cube equity standpoint, just for our own cube, we're sort of considering whether or not this, like, makes more sense as a white quote-unquote creature land, and the more I think about it, the more this, like, this provides additional support to a thing that I want to see white successfully doing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think we should run this card for the sole reason that it might lead to the gameplay action of attack with my Blood Artist at some point during its lifespan.
Dude, hard evidence into
campaign. We're really cooking.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot of time on the white one. How about the black one here? This one's a little bit more straightforward.
So I put this one on here when I was still mentally shortcutting to this being Black Moorland Haunt, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. We just make some 1/1 flyers, and we really good. Turns out they tricked us. This is the one set where the white spirit tokens do not have flying for some reason. So I think this card is extremely mediocre. It's got the Forester Plains Ender's Tap that makes black mana. And it's 1 in a black, tap, exile a creature card for your graveyard, make a 1/1 spirit token. There's obviously grave break synergies if you're running them, but like we don't really have those at the mainline cube power level. You know, it can give you a little bit of extra graveyard value over the course of a game, but it's pretty narrow. It doesn't make flyers like I thought, so it's a substantially worse card. It's quite a bit of mana to make a few extra bodies, which is fine. I think you could put this in there. It wouldn't be like crazy embarrassing, but I think Spymaster's Vault is probably just a better black utility land.
Yeah, I'm not into this. Of all of the colors in Magic, black is the color that's the most likely to be taking advantage of creatures in its graveyard in some other way anyway.
Yeah, we've noticed you don't usually want to exile your creatures.
Yeah, you don't always want to do that. I'm not convinced that this is any good.
Okay, that closes out all the cards we wanted to talk about. I'm sure there were others in there we could have added in as well. This set is like banger central, but actually, don't go there. Don't go to banger central. Overall impressions, I'm going to keep mine very simple and sweet because Chris started off our conversation with like, I hope we don't have to record for 4 hours straight, and we're hitting the 4 hour mark.
4 hours later, yeah.
I will just say my initial impressions of the set from a cube perspective, and honestly the set as a whole, was that the mechanics are clean, the art is great, and the power level is high despite that simplicity. Like I love everything I'm seeing from the set, and I hope the retail limited format can like kind of tie it all together as like an all-timer, because from just cube design and card design and artistic approach, like this is an all-timer already for me.
Yeah, a little worried about that Salt Road Pack Beast Overlord that we're gonna face during week 1 or 2, but set's got great flavor, fantastic mechanics. Like I know I was poo-pooing some of the cards in this set, but it's not because I most of them I thought were interesting, if nothing else. Like even if I don't think they necessarily all keep up on power level, they deserve consideration, even if they don't demand to be played, as we've been saying. Yeah, I think this set looks to be fantastic. I'm really, really hopeful that the limited format, like you said, will be a banger that, you know, is kind of able to like bring this together, really be a great set. Yeah, I think they nailed this one. I mean, it's hard to find things to dislike about this, at least in the card designs. Like very few cards that were just like completely egregious cards, and the ones that were so egregious that they'll probably make themselves clear after a time or two drafting. So I'm really excited to play this set. I'm also going to be on break this week, so I'm going to get plenty of time to try it out when it launches. So excited about that. Yeah, I don't really have much to say. It's great to get a real Magic set after between Aether Drift and whatever the Universe is Beyond trio coming later in this year. So we're not going to get a lot of real Magic sets very often anymore. So hopefully they'll be like this, where they'll be really, really good designs, and we'll be reminded of why we play this game sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was just said. Ether Drift, in the Ether Drift review, I already made my thoughts on that clear. I thought thematically it was a huge mess. This set brings me a lot of joy. It feels kind of like it harkens back to a different time in Magic when sets were thematically cohesive. The art style is great with some exceptions, and there are a lot of powerful cards that have interesting lines and play patterns and subtleties to them that create all of that wonderful sort of play in design without having inscrutable text boxes. I think that they did a really, really good job here. Going back to a really popular plane that's evocative for many people, especially when like the OG draft format was probably until it was re-exposed to the sunlight, in the context of modern Magic, like a lot of people's favorite draft format of all time. If they had come out with a turd on a return to cons, I think it would have been a huge psychological blow and disappointment to the Magic community, and I think that they really delivered here. Obviously, we don't know anything about the limited format yet, but just as a piece of art, as a piece of design, I think that this is the type of set that reminds me of why I got into playing Magic.
Yeah, none of that goofy bull crap that we've seen. Like they didn't go for pun names, they didn't go for goofy flavor text. Like they really drove home what people liked about the original set.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
Even like the ones that are a little more on the nose, like Smile at Death, they didn't go full blown like quote, like you said, quoting. It's
referential. It's good referential. Yeah, like so much of this set is like the Siege Rhino, Skirmish Rhino. It's like I get what you're doing there, but like it's in service of things that people like instead of like here's the Mario blue shell from Mario Kart, and it's like that's cute. I get it. It's fun, but like this set is clearly showing that like Wizards of the Coast can make its own property and make it awesome. Make it really cool and engaging. So yeah, that's Tarkir Dragonstorm for Cube. Lots going on in this set. I'm very, very excited for the first time in a very long time to like try out all the new stuff and see what works and what doesn't. Reminder to the listeners, you can find our socials at Jank Diver Gaming on Twitter, youtube.com/Jank Diver Gaming. You can find Teld streaming on twitch.tv/Teld Talks, TELD Talks, and come join our Discord server. Give us your feedback. Let us know what cards we missed. Surely you are still here at the end of this 4-hour episode listening to me say this. But yeah, we will be back. Hopefully Chris will be back with us on a normal cadence. And I think I actually have a pitch for the next episode we should talk about.
Awesome.
So I'll pitch that off air. And we will be back with a regularly scheduled program. Thanks for joining, hanging out, and we will see you all next time. Hey, dude. How's it going? Oh, man, they didn't talk about you on the episode either. No, can you believe that? I was on the show notes document, and they were right at the part where they were going to chat about fleeting effigy, and they just decided to skip over it because the episode was going too long or some shit. It just really sucks, Craterhoof Behemoth. Honestly, I'm pretty surprised they didn't mention you either. I mean, look at you. You're the frickin' hoof, and they couldn't even say a few words about you being in the set. Yeah, man, you know how it is for reprints. Oh, we're already on the client, so guess we don't need to talk about that card. It's just rough, man. Yeah, I mean, come on, you're a giant elephant this time. You think those assholes could have said something about you. It sucks, but I mean, they were recording for over 4 hours, so I kind of get it. No, fuck that, man. Look, I know these clowns don't like 1-drops, but I'm a 2/2 haste for 1 mana. Like, that's gotta be worth a passive mention, right? I mean, they can talk about fucking Stinkhole Scavenger for like an hour, but they can't talk about a 1-mana 2/2 haste that dodges wraths and sorcery speed removal and has a pump ability. Yeah, what a big L for them, right? Enjoy your grease wrench goblins, I guess. Oh, what a bunch of buffoons. Wait a second, we got another one coming. Hey, over here. Oh man, is this where cards go when they don't get talked about on the review? Hey y'all, I'm Mox Jasper. I thought for sure they were gonna mention me at the end there. Oh, no way, man. You suck ass, dude. Nah, you fucking suck, bro. Stupid Dragon Mox. Hey, Mox Amber called. They want their design back. Hope you like Commander, jackass. Yeah, I'd rather play Ornithopter. Stupid.